Welcome back, everyone. We're here with John Delaney at the Native American Presidential Forum 2019.
Good afternoon, Congressman. Good afternoon. Welcome. During your opening comments, you made a few remarks. One which was that the United States has not fulfilled its obligations. The second one is the value statement. Within that space, the budget of the president is a value statement about what the president's priorities are for the country. In 2018, with the release of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights Broken Promises report, which was an update to 2003 Quiet Crisis report, it once again highlighted the failures of the United States to honor and fulfill its trust and treat obligations to any country. These failures are directly attributable to many of the challenges that any country faces. Specifically, these failures are a factor in the many socio-economic and health disparities that exist in any country today. Further, the Office of Management and Budget, which will report directly to you, has recently been reporting to Congress that it appropriates roughly $21.5 billion on an annual basis to any country in fulfillment of its trust and treaty obligations. We dispute that figure because we know it includes dollars that tribal nations are eligible for, but never actually receive or access for a variety of reasons. But regardless, even if that $21.5 billion figure were accurate, it reflects less than 1/2 of 1% of the overall fiscal year 19 U.S. budget. So my question to you, Congressman, recognizing the continued failures as outlined in the 2018 Broken Promises report, and the fact that much of the power and wealth of the United States today is generated from the very lands and natural resources that once belonged to us, what steps would you take as president to ensure the fulfillment of promises and commitments made to America's first people is a priority, including and leading with full mandatory and advance appropriations for all any country funding?
Well, thank you for the question. I've always believed that, and Speaker Pelosi always frames issues this way, where she says, show me your budget and I'll know your values. And I think that's what you're getting at. And we just talked about healthcare. The estimates that I've seen, for example, if we were to actually invest in your healthcare system to get it up to the levels to be on parity with what people would expect from what would be considered good healthcare outcomes, would almost double that number on an annual basis. I mean, I have seen estimates that indicate to me there's a $20 billion a year shortfall in healthcare alone. So the way I think about it is as follows. What's important is not necessarily what the percentage of the budget is. What's important is what are the programs that need to be funded to fulfill our obligations and to ensure that basic individual dignity is being met. And we have to fund those priorities appropriately, whether it be healthcare, whether it be education, whether it be housing. And that's how we have to think about it. We can't think of it as a kind of a top-down number where we pick a number, 20 billion or 30 billion or 40 billion. But we actually look at the programs and we figure out what levels of funding are required to actually start changing some of these outcomes. And that's where you start beginning your budget discussions. That's how I would think about that.
Thank you. Our next question is from Lisa Whitepipe, Rosebud.
Lisa Whitepipe from Ochiapi. My name is Lisa Whitepipe and I am a council representative from the Rosebud Sioux tribe. And it's an honor to sit on this panel today, and thank you for accepting us to be here today, Congressman Delaney. My question is about the opioid crisis. Since the opioid crisis began, American Indians have experienced a 5-fold increase in deaths by overdose, and families have been greatly impacted by the opioid use. In recent years, several tribes have filed lawsuits against opioid manufacturers and distributors for their role in creating and perpetuating the epidemic, including the Rosebud Sioux tribe, the Flanders Sioux tribe, the Sisseton-Wahpeton Sioux tribe, the Cherokee Nation, and the Navajo Nation. Tribal citizens suffer at the hands of pharmaceutical companies, and fighting the epidemic causes financial strain for tribal governments. When you are president, what is your plan to fight the opioid epidemic? And how will you ensure that tribes have the financial resources they need to take on the crisis?
It's a great question, and the opioid crisis is something that's happening all around this country that doesn't nearly get the attention it deserves. It's estimated that 70,000 lives were lost in our country last year from opioid overdoses, which, to put it into perspective, is the equivalent of a Vietnam every year in terms of the number of lives that are lost. And this is destroying communities all over this country, all over this country. And lots of factors contributed to it. But there's no question, in my opinion, that the pharmaceutical manufacturers and the distributors who are engaged in opioid manufacturing and distribution are culpable and need to be held liable for the destruction of human life and the havoc they've caused in communities all across this country. There is almost no argument against that. If you actually look at the practices which are now finally being reported upon, the aggressive sales techniques that were employed, the predatory marketing practices that were deployed, it's just a tragedy of enormous proportions. And it has to be dealt with. It has to be dealt with in your communities, in your tribes, but it has to be dealt with all across this country. It starts by making sure these pharmaceutical companies are held accountable, full stop. And that's why I support all of these legal actions that are being taken against these companies. And I hope they result in enormous judgments and start providing some compensation for the individuals and the communities and the families that have been affected by this. But we also have to realize, as a country, that we have an obligation to actually be combating this in the streets where it's happening. And when you go around this country, like I have, you've actually see in individual communities programs that are working. And you see different programs in different communities that are working depending upon the specific needs of those communities, in terms of how care is delivered, in terms of how mental health care, because underlying this crisis is an enormous mental health crisis in this country, which I think you can link to so many other issues in our nation, including the opioid epidemic. So it's ultimately going to take very significant financial resources provided by the federal government to communities, to health systems, to providers, to nonprofits that are actually on the front lines combating this issue. And I've looked at numbers up to $100 billion over 10 years that have to be spent to actually address this crisis. And as president, I'm committed to ending this crisis. But we have to also address the underlying drivers of the crisis. So if you put aside the bad actions by the pharmaceutical companies and the drug distribution companies, because they worked hand in hand, and by the way, they knew exactly what they were doing. These companies monitor data every 5 minutes. They knew that in certain communities in this country, the number of opioids that were sold over a 5-year period increased 28-fold. They saw those numbers coming in. They knew what was going on. So putting aside the culpability there and the liability there, which I fully intend to pursue so that we don't end this crisis with a bunch of people not going to jail and not paying fines. Because there were bad acts that happened that created this crisis. But we also have to get at the conditions that allowed it to grow so dramatically and spread so quickly, which is mental health and economic despair. Because those are the conditions that allow this kind of a crisis to magnify and get out of control as fast as it did. And so you also need a president who's committed to fixing the mental health crisis in this country, where 40 million people self-identify as having a mental illness, and we know the number is much greater than that. We know the number is much greater than that. And we continue to stigmatize mental illness in this country, which is terrible, right? No one should be ashamed of having a mental illness. No family member should be ashamed of a family member that has a mental illness. And until we actually get beyond that stigma, we will not be able to change the healthcare delivery system so that mental health is treated on par with physical health. Because right now, at least in the US healthcare system generally, mental health claims are 4 times more likely to get denied than physical health claims. That's because we've allowed the stigma to affect how mental health is delivered. So we have to rebuild our mental health system. And then we have to be creating economic opportunities so that people don't have this kind of economic despair, because that contributes to this high unemployment and people not having faith in their future creates the kind of conditions that allow this to happen. So I'm committed as president to not only standing strong against these pharmaceutical companies and making sure they're held responsible and the individual executives in these companies are held responsible, but I'm also for making sure the resources are available to combat this crisis in the communities by funding programs that work. And what works is different in different parts of the country and in different communities. And I'm also committed to ending the mental health crisis in this country and actually doing things to create economic opportunities so we don't have the kind of economic despair that leads to the creation of this.
Thank you.
We're in overtime, so we have to make, we'll have 2 questions, and you can answer both of them if you will. Wayne Fredericks and Larry Wright, and we'll just combine them. So Wayne.
Wopila Tonka, Chante Washte na Bay Chuzapo, Washichu Machiapi, Wayne Frederick. I'm a tribal land manager and political and civil rights organizer, ex-elected official. I have a question that you touched on your platform, was tribal, it's about economic development. Tribal nations are increasingly looking to the future of international trade to grow their economies. As you know, a robust global trade system can be developed to battle the adverse impacts we are currently experiencing as a result of the tariffs. Global trade represents new opportunities for our economies, our youth, and our future. How do we envision the tribes moving forward in the realm of global trade, whether it's in agriculture, electronics, or any other number of the industries? What do you see in the future for us, and how do the tribes fit into that global trade plan with our sovereignty?
Before you answer,
Okay, sorry.
Associated with that, my question's on broadband. We're very interested in your broadband access plans. Access to broadband remains a key issue in Indian country. On tribal lands, and particularly in rural areas, both fixed and mobile broadband is less likely to be available than on non-tribal lands. In many instances, neither Wi-Fi access nor mobile LTE service are readily available. If either service is available, there are typically fewer carriers than on non-tribal lands. Lack of broadband access contributes to a variety of challenges, whether for students who need to do homework or for workers who need to ensure their skills are competitive, and increasingly healthcare, with specifically telehealth opportunities and the global economic arena. So as president, how will you work to bridge the digital divide and bring broadband access to every corner of Indian country?
So I'll start with that and go to trade. So I proposed the largest infrastructure plan of anyone running for president. It's $2 trillion, fully paid for, and it includes not just roads and bridges and water systems and energy systems, but it also includes communications, particularly rural broadband. Because if you're a young person in 2019 and you don't have access to high-speed communications, you don't have a shot. Let's face it. And so we have to make sure all communities, in particular rural communities and Native American communities, that young people have access to high-speed communications, full stop. And it's been a big priority of mine since I was in Congress. I had the largest bipartisan bill in the Congress, $1 trillion, creating fully paid for, $1 trillion of infrastructure funding, 40 Democrats, 40 Republicans, there was nothing like it. And I've expanded that in my presidential platform to be a $2 trillion platform with an allocation, a specific allocation for communities that are struggling economically. Because New York City can pay for a lot of its infrastructure, as can San Francisco, et cetera. Other communities can't. They should get a disproportionate allocation. So trade. Thank you for the question on trade. So I think Trump's trade war, the president's trade war, is destabilizing the global economy. and it is hurting the United States of America. And I hope this doesn't happen, but recent indications point towards us entering into a recession because of it. What the president doesn't understand is that we're in a global economy, and we have to be working with our allies in ensuring that the United States is competing as successfully in the global economy, and that all of our communities around this country are getting the benefits of being part of the global economy and receiving direct foreign investment. I am the only candidate for president who supports President Obama's effort to enter into the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which I was the point person for him in the House of Representatives when he was trying to get this done in the Congress. And by the way, this was his primary domestic economic priority in his second term. And I think if we would have had the Trans-Pacific Partnership, first of all, every acre of agricultural land in the United States of America would be worth more money today, because all crop prices would be higher, because our farmers would have access to markets, and they don't want handouts, they want markets. So as president, I plan on getting us back in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but I'm also very mindful that every community benefit from global trade, because historically we haven't seen that. We've seen some communities get completely hollowed out by it, and others benefit enormously. And I think the Native American community and our tribes should have a seat at the table and make sure that the U.S. trade policy, which I fully support, again, I'm literally the only person running who supports President Obama's signature initiative, which I find quite frankly hard to believe, because we see what's happening with this trade war. We see the effect it's having on our communities. But I commit that Native American communities will have a seat at the table to make sure U.S. trade policy benefits the United States generally, but benefits all communities specifically, because I think there's unique opportunities for your communities associated with this. So thank you for asking the question.
Please give a warm thank you to Representative Delaney and our panel.
Thank you for having me.
And we will be back shortly with the next item.
All right, everybody. Welcome to live media. People making comments. Yeah, they'll be right back. We're going to have to probably mute this. Again, you're watching the Frank Lamere Native American Presidential Forum 2019. Who's next? You don't know who's next?
Kamala.
No, Kamala's after. I just totally said it too. Somebody is next. Julian Castro is next at 2 p.m. We're going to have to mute the mic for a little bit. Oh, no, we don't have to mute it. Where's it? 3?
Yep, so...
What time is it right now?
It's almost 2, so Kamala's on at 2, live stream.
Oh, they change it?
I think so.
We're all talking to the live stream. This is the independent media crew is here. Who wants to talk?
We're all trying to...
I'm the chair of the Native Caucus of the Nebraska Democratic Party.
Wow.
I helped
That's Ruth
That's
Buffalo.
Ruth Buffalo. We just had lunch. We had
I want to be able to say,
not that native.
Congressman Delaney.
But I helped a lot get the Native candidates here, especially Bernie. So like, I was telling them, we're not supposed to brag in our culture, but I'm bragging. I got Bernie. I'm that
On our feet, the brags are on our feet. That's Ruth Ann Buffalo too, from North Dakota rep, right? Yeah. State rep from NODAC. What? All right. Anyways, I've spent a lot of life in North Dakota. Anyways, we're gonna be back. There is some announcements going on, so I'm gonna make you listen to them instead of me, and then we'll get back.
Apology for that.
Yeah, so 2 p.m. Kamala Harris.
A couple other things.
Oh, they changed it. Okay.
Yeah, they did.
I memorized it to be good.
I read it yesterday.
Okay, Kamala Harris is next at 2 p.m. I just changed everybody. So get ready. You can see more people coming in now.
And I think it's important enough for you to hear about it today.
Sit still, cuz. But there were only like 2 of them, right?
What's
What?
it called? A survey was done all across the United States. They picked 1,054 people and asked this question. And I think this is very important for the Native brothers and sisters sitting out there. Means that we are less than 2% of the population. How we're going to take and make this movement work.
Get a post ready.
And so the question was, do you support
we're just gonna
or
confirm really
oppose
quickly
equal
everybody
access
else.
for
Okay.
Native Americans
You're ready to
living on
confirm.
Indian
Oh,
reservations
Kamala Harris
to
is
vote
live stream,
in
so
federal, state,
that
and
way?
local elections.
Is that right?
You know, it sounds like a simple question, and it sounds, you know, you would think, wow, 100%.
That was the impression that I got. It was just on live stream.
But from the polls,
Okay.
There's no what?
61% strongly supported this. They strongly supported Native Americans
was
living
there
on
before.
reservation
They moved
having
me,
the
but that's
same
fine.
type of access that people off reservations have. And this
for
is
tribal
important.
leaders
If we're
anyway.
going to go on
She's tribal
to
leader.
That's
2020
true.
and if we're
Yeah,
going
you guys
to be
technically
a nation that is able to
Respect,
make
respect,
decisions,
Ruth. All right, respect. Thanks
you
for letting us
have
sit up
to
here with
know
you.
We have people
Yes.
supporting us. 61% of the population strongly agree.
Okay.
All right, and then if you go with somewhat support, 13%.
We should get people here
So,
and
if
after
you look
each
at
one,
that-
just interview them what they thought.
We have
Yeah, that's what I was
74%
gonna do.
basically under this poll, 74% of
At least after the
America
Kamala.
that supports us having equality at the ballot box. So I think that's very important for us to, as we move forward, is that we have allies out there that are going to be able to help and support us in moving forward for 2020. And I think this is very, very important. This was done by Progressive Change Institute, and really, it's one of the very first times that we had a major organization such as this that reached out to ask a specific question concerning Native Americans and Indian reservations. So I want you guys to go ahead and kind of digest that and understand that we have allies out there. We're looking for 2020. One of the other things I want to point out, I mean, this forum's great, and I appreciate everybody being here. But I also want to tell you that as of tomorrow, Board of Elections is going to be loading up, and we're heading to North Carolina. We're working with the Lumbee tribe, and we're going to where District 9 happened, in which there was rampant voter fraud. And I want to tell you, throughout all of that, if you look on the Lumbee Indian Reservation, the county they were in, 4 times as many absentee ballots were thrown away or destroyed where the vote didn't count. And so what we're looking at now, we're talking about 2020, we're talking about 7 states. What we're looking at now is the test run. We have on September 9th a special election going on in North Carolina. We have, gotten the okay and from the tribe for us to help them during this. So if you look at how things are going today, the divide of what's happening in politics and what's happening in different states, the 2019 September 9th election is going to give us a roadmap of what we're talking about here is going to work. Because
Thank you,
we
Louis
also have
Levy
in North Carolina a
and Linda
divided
Smith
side.
for the thanks.
We have these people
Anyone
that
else
no
too?
matter
Hey, George.
what are going to vote this way, or no matter what are going to vote this way. And then we have the Lumbee tribal members. If they're going to vote on their issues, which way are they going to vote? But I can guarantee you there is about 40,000 eligible voters within the Lumbee Nation. And that election that happened that was thrown out because of fraud, that was 1,000 votes. Just 1,000. So can you imagine, depending on how the Lumbee members turn out in this coming election on September 9th, 40,000 eligible voters. Can you imagine now what the candidate that actually dealt with them and worked with the Lumbee tribe is going to be elected? That's why it's important. When we're up here as natives and we talk about the elections, we never talk about the parties. We talk about our nations and our people. And so it's always an issue thing. And neither party should ever take our vote for granted. And if they do, I think they're going to find out it's not going to work that way no more. Well, I'm older. I'm hoping everybody is wiser. So with that, I'll quit, but I really like the fact that Congressman Delaney did not want to do a, gee, I'm sorry for everything. I like the fact that he wants to have specifics, and believe me, we got plenty of them, in which he is willing to support as the president. So with that said, we're getting ready for our next candidate, and this is history, people. This is history. You all made it. We had tribal leaders from all over the states. We have tribal members. We have the youth. We have our elders. You made history. Doc Kevin.
Okay, everyone, so we're in between candidates. I'm hearing Kamala Harris is next? Kamala? Congresswoman? Is it? Senator. I know all about this stuff. All right, so we have the next panelist, again, made of all Indigenous people. We're bringing you here to mostly listen to the questions being posed. So please spend time. We're an educational nonprofit. The questions that are being posed are from Indian country, having to do with issues that are affecting Native American people right now. And so Kamala Harris is here, but please pay some attention to the questions being asked. Is she? No way. Is she? Oh, sorry. All right, so I guess it'll be a second.
If you are joining right now, we are waiting to hear from Kamala Harris.
Wow, I bet you guys thought you were done with me, huh? The next presidential candidate is Kamala Harris, Senator Kamala Harris from California. And, I don't know how many people have actually done this before. If you have, next time I'll call you. But getting candidates and getting their schedule and trying to get things worked out, and they have prior commitments and stuff, it's time consuming, and sometimes you're pulling your hair out, and I don't have that much. But Senator Harris, we've been talking to her, actually really worked her schedule so that when we were getting to the final moments, and we were looking at the polling, what if we get number 17, 18, 19, and 20, but we don't get we might get 21, 22, 23, 24. That's really not a forum, And we, we were really, really lucky to get the candidates we did, but then all of a sudden, we get a call from Senator Harris and said, I would love to participate in this Frank Lamere Native American presidential forum. And it was all at the last minute. And it was like, yes, But there's more to that. It's not that she's just running for a candidate. She was the Attorney General before. And if you heard us talk, and we talked about the Remove the Stain Act, we also turned around and we talked about the missing and murdered Indigenous women and children. And throughout her career as an Attorney General, what she was able to do was she was able to do investigations and prosecution into gangs in which they were using the gangs for sex trafficking, which again, we were having women who were murdered, children who were murdered, or put into sex trafficking. And she was able to prosecute these gangs. And it's not easy. I was in law enforcement. You know, you have so many people within a gang, you have to have real solid evidence. It doesn't just happen overnight. You have to work at it, and you have to keep on investigating. It's not an overnight thing. But she was able, using, you know, her powers as Attorney General and law enforcement, to find these gangs and to turn around and to prosecute them. And by doing so, was able to save some of the women and some of the children that were being affected by this. But that wasn't enough. What she was able to do then, she was able to do case studies, look into why this was happening, how it was happening, and doing whatever was necessary in order to stop the, you know, the sex trafficking of women and children. So I'm really happy, not only because she's a presidential candidate, but a candidate that has actually worked at what we are talking about, what is, you know, destroying Indian country, you know. So having the missing and having the murdered indigenous women and children, having somebody that has the knowledge behind that, and being able to work, and whether it's as a president, which, you know, everybody's hoping for, or whether it's as a United States Senator. Either way, it's a win-win for Indian country. And we need to make sure that as we go through this, we understand that this isn't just about I got you moment. We need to learn from what they've been able to accomplish, and they need to learn of what we need as far as our issues. So, you know, I hope that as we go through this, and the panel here, hey, John. John Echohawk, Native American Rights Fund. I have to bring this up here. Native American Rights Fund has been here for a long time, but John has been the executive director. And recently, we have been fighting. We fight ICWA cases every 10 years that we go to the Supreme Court. And every time that we fight them, we look at NARF, and what NARF has been able to do has been able to win these cases for our families and our children. So, thank you. And I know I'm supposed to be introducing camera, but I saw John and I had to tell you. So, hopefully, as we get going, you'll think of questions that may not be answered here. But guess what? They were here. That means that those questions that you couldn't answer here, you can now ask them, whether it's calling into their campaign, whether it's sending them an email. But don't let this momentum that we have die here. Take the power. Take the power that you have put together here today and yesterday. Take that power and keep it going. Keep that momentum going. Ask your questions. Make sure that you get an answer. And make sure that you take and consider whoever's running, whether or not they're hearing what you say. And I talk to a lot of press. And one of the things they go is, you know, what are you Indians looking for? And so I went like this. No. What are you looking for? We said equality. And I said, you know, when we're here and we talk to you, more than likely we can't. But all we're asking for is when you go out on these campaigns and you have these debates and you're talking to America and you're saying, I'm going to do this for you, I'm going to do that for you. All we're asking is equality.
Oh, she's Skyping.
And so, all right. All we're asking for is equality, and that means that what we want here is we want to have our voice heard equally as your voice. That's what this is about. So on that, I'd like to introduce Senator Kamala Harris, the presidential candidate, and I hope everybody listens well. The panelists, great questions, and again, thank you for being here.
Am I on?
Good afternoon, yes, you can make an opening statement.
Hi, it's Kamala Harris, and I'm honored to be a part of the Frank Lamere Native American Presidential Forum. OJ, thank you for your words. I'm looking forward to our discussion. I only have a few comments to make as we begin. And it is that there is unequivocal support and respect that I have for the sovereignty of Native tribes. And that this is a lifelong commitment. I was raised and grew up always knowing about and feeling very strongly about what we need to do to speak truth about the generations of violence and oppression that have occurred against our Native Americans at the hands of the American government, the United States government. And there is work we need to do and continue to do that is about not only restoring tribal land, but also acknowledging the historical trauma that has resulted from those many years of violence and frankly crimes that were committed. These were crimes that ranged from murder and rape to theft in profound proportions. And so I am honored to be with the leaders who are a part of this forum. I thank you for bringing us all together. I'm sorry I am not there in person, but I thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak directly.
Thank you, Senator. We have two tyrannies to worry about, one colonialism, but the other is the clock. So we have candidates from here on out, so we're going to move fairly quickly. We'll start again with our elder, Marcella LeBeau. The first question.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here, to be a part of this great movement. My question today is back home on the Cheyenne River Reservation. I believe that there's a pervasive sadness that exists because the medals of honor that were given at Wounded Knee, there has never been a resolution to that. So my question is, do you support the removal of the STAIN Act? That's my question today.
Yes, I do. And the reality is that the Battle of Wounded Knee killed at least 100 and I think almost 146 if I recall, Native Americans from the Sioux tribe. It was a massacre. And we have to, again, history has to reflect fact. And that was a massacre. And I feel strongly that given my longstanding position about making sure that we acknowledge the wrongs that communities have experienced and that we acknowledge what we can do currently to address those wrongs is important. So yes, and thank you.
Thank you. Our first question comes from Stephen Rowe Lewis from Gila River.
Thank you. Senator Harris, I'm representing the Yakima and Peepash people from the Gila River Indian community. Climate change is the issue of our generation. 7 generations from now, our generation will be remembered for how we address it. Native communities are disproportionately impacted by climate change because of our reliance on subsistence lifestyles and economies, and because it is not easy for us to move from our homelands. Water, our shoda, is critical for my community, but our major source of water is the Colorado River, which is overallocated and threatened by a prolonged drought. As president, what steps will you take to ensure that Native nations have a seat at the table in developing solutions to climate change?
Without any question, as the original people and always as leaders on this issue of what we need to do to respect and honor the climate and the earth and all that is on it, will look to you for leadership, and you will be front and center in terms of what we need to do to preserve our natural resources, and also to your point about water, what we need to do to ensure that this precious and diminishing resource, that we have policies that are smart about preserving it and increasing our ability to do, and if you'll allow me the details of it, to do everything from what we must around capture of water, storage of water, recycling, conservation, and it is the Native people who have always understood that better than most. And we need to look to you, and I will look to you for not only the best practices, but also we need to also just to some extent change the culture on the subject. And you have always, as the Native people and as the tribes have always, by culture, respected this earth in a way that so many have not, which is why we're facing the crisis that we're now facing.
Thank you, Senator Harris.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Sue Maston. You're up.
Hi, I'm Susan Maston. I had the distinct honor to serve my people as the Yurok Tribal Chair, but I also served Indian country as the past president for the National Congress of American Indians. And only 2 women have been elected to that position in 50 years. So we are from California. We are on our homelands, which are on the Klamath River, which is the 2nd largest river in the state of California. We're a fishing people, and our rights are not quantified yet, and so we have to sit every year with the Department of Interior and the Bureau of Reclamation and it actually is disgraceful that we have to do that we have to spend our time, money, and resources to remind the government about their trust responsibilities, not only to the tribes, but to the resource itself. And so to have to go there every year to plead for the health of the Klamath River ecosystem is shameful. And I think that the most horrific thing that I had to experience as a chairperson was when the government decided in a dry water year to allocate fish to the ag business instead of to the fish, and 80,000 fish died, 80,000 adult Chinook on the lower 20 miles of the Klamath River, which is on the Yurok Reservation. That should never be acceptable in this time and era. And so my question is with that, because other tribes are in the same situation in California and on the West for not having their water rights quantified, but we retain that federally reserved fishing and water right. And so my question to you is, what would your administration do to assure the protection of federally reserved water rights?
Well, let me start. Well, first of all, congratulations, and thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me this opportunity. First of all, it will be my policy that there will be tribal consultation with cabinet officials, whoever that cabinet official may be, who is working on climate change, and so that we can be very clear about not only what you have in terms of input, but also what will happen in terms of impact. Because it is, and from my perspective, I feel very strongly, this has to be about both. It has to be about seeking the advice and perspective, but also before there's an implementation of any policy or perspective, that we have very carefully and thoughtfully considered and have full input from you on what might be the impact. Not only the immediate impact, but the long-term impact, and also the impact from a historical perspective. And so part of that is about making sure that there is consultation with the tribal leaders by all cabinet officials on any policy or practice that is that affects climate change, but frankly so many others, because if you laws that impact the tribes. The federal laws that impact the tribes are very complicated, and it is also my intention to consult with the tribes on and including on judicial nominations and on the decisions that we make in a variety of ways that without that consultation cannot ensure that we have appropriately considered the impact on the tribes.
I appreciate that, but more importantly, I hope that you spend time with us to learn, because unfortunately that is one thing that is not taught in the schools, is that unique relationship, that unique government-to-government relationship that tribal nations hold with the federal government.
I agree, and thank you. And I look forward to that time together.
Thank you. The next question is from Harold Frazier from Cheyenne River.
My name is Harold Frazier, Chairman of Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe. You know, one of the things I think is really important in Indian country is land into trust. You know, and one of the things that kind of appalls me is we have to ask the government for our lands back. I mean, we were here first, and these are our lands. And when you talk about sovereignty and treaty rights, I really hope that each of you candidates not only mention it, but live it and practice it. So I have a question. When you were Attorney General, there were a number of tribal trust land applications, also known as fee to trust, by California tribes that your office opposed. To clear up some confusion with the tribal community, why did your office oppose these applications? In addition, as president, what will be your position regarding tribal land acquisitions and the protection of tribal lands?
Yeah. So first, let me just say, I strongly believe and take very seriously that we must acknowledge that the government of the United States stole land, took land from the tribes, and that there must be restoration of that ownership for those lands that were possessed by the tribes. So that is a value I hold very dearly and very strongly. When I was Attorney General, I had a number of responsibilities, including being a lawyer for the governor. And it was in that capacity when the governor I was the lawyer for the governor, and the governor made decisions about the fee to trust applications by California tribes. As the lawyer, as the law office for the governor, we had to file those letters. But that was never a reflection and has never been a reflection of my personal perspective. And when I've had the ability to independently act, not on behalf of a client, I think my history and my positions are very clear, which is that there has to be a restoration of tribal land, and my view is very strongly that the acquisition of land in trust is essential to tribal self-determination and providing the foundation for not only economic but also political growth, and it has to be honored, and that the sovereignty of the tribes must be honored in that regard.
Our next question comes from David Sickey, Coshada Tribe of Louisiana.
All right, good afternoon, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure, it's an honor and a privilege to be here at this historic forum over the course of 2 days. I am the tribal chairman for the Coshada Tribe of Louisiana. We are one of 4 federally recognized tribes in the state. We can trace our documented history back to 1540 when the Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto encountered a group of 250 or so tribal people. It's an honor to be here. We are a 960 tribal member nation located in southwest Louisiana, and yet we are one of the top 10 largest private employers in the state of Louisiana, which we are very proud of. Senator Harris, as you are well aware, your esteemed colleague and friend, Governor Gavin Newsom, issued a historic blanket genocidal apology, the first ever by any governor of all the states here in the Union. And also, Senator Harris, you are well aware that you have more Native Americans in the state of California than any other state in the Union. And I also know that your position on withdrawing troops and bringing them back home from Afghanistan, I'm also aware of that. And some of you in this room, and Senator Harris, you may be well aware that also we Native Americans are the highest percentage of military personnel as a segment of society than any other.
Yes.
Which we are also very proud of.
Right.
And knowing that, and given all that, and given the cost of war in terms of finances and human capital, we need to reconstruct our own native nations here in this wonderful country and restore them back to its former glory that it once was before they were decimated. George C. Marshall, during his remarks at Harvard, introduced a policy, and he said, our policy is not directed against any country, but against hunger, poverty, desperation, and chaos. Senator, given that, will you, as our President of the United States, commit to a Marshall Plan for Indian country to help the most impoverished people in our land?
Yes. Yes. I think there's no question that there needs to be much more focus in a very organized way that is about addressing the harm, addressing the impact, addressing the generational impact, and thinking about how moving forward we can make sure that that we are acknowledging it. Yes.
Our next question comes from Melanie Benjamin from Mille Lacs.
Good afternoon. Melanie Benjamin from the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, Minnesota. And I'll say welcome. And also thank you for attending today. And also thank you for meeting with the tribal leaders after the Detroit debate. It was a very nice meeting.
Yeah, it's very helpful for me too. Thank you.
So my question is going to be language immersion and cultural-based education. Education has been a pillar of your campaign. Education can be transformative in many positive ways, but the boarding school era is a testament to the ways in which education can be and has been used by the United States to purposefully destroy Native people, cultures, and language. Reversal of this federal policy and restoration of culturally based education and language immersion schools is an imperative for a survival for ourselves as people. As president, what would you do to reverse the centuries of damaging federal policy and restore culture and language in our educational systems?
Right. And thank you for the time that you spent with me. I will tell you, this is something I've worked on and been aware of for quite some time. You know, we had on this call one of the elders, but we know that generation, we're losing those generations who know and speak the language. And because so much of it was part of oral tradition, it's not been written down. And so we have to put the resources into capturing it. And there should be some real focus on how we do that in a way that puts the resources into it. So I am very aware of this issue and supportive of what we need to do to make sure that these precious languages are not lost. To lose them is to lose part of our history and culture. And so that has to be about a federal investment through the Department of Education, because I do agree with you, this is an issue that is about education. In a way that we make a priority of preserving the language as well as the culture, and do it in a way that also is not only about preservation, but also then the education of future generations.
Our next question comes from John Eckelhart from the Native American Rights Fund.
Thank you for participating in this forum, Senator Harris.
Okay.
The Indian Child Welfare Act was enacted in 1978 to address the stark number of Native children being taken from their families and communities. At the time, 25 to 35% of all Native children were being taken from their parents, and of those, 85% of children were placed with non-Native families and outside of their tribal communities. Even today, Native children are still 4 times overrepresented in foster care. Despite the success and importance of the Indian Child Welfare Act, a judge in Texas ruled the law unconstitutional last October. The ruling was overturned by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals earlier this month. As president, how will you protect landmark legislation like the Indian Child Welfare Act and other laws designed to uphold the rights of tribes to protect the welfare, well-being, and fate of their children? And as president, what qualifications will you look for in judicial nominees who may hear cases regarding tribal sovereignty?
All right, thank you. I'll tell you, you can look to my history to know what I'll do in the future. I, as Attorney General of California, led the ICWA issue as a civil rights issue because, from my perspective, this is a civil rights issue instead of, only being a matter of compliance, right? It's a matter of rights and responsibilities and standards. And so when I was Attorney General, I looked out at issues impacting a number of populations of children, including our Native children, and saw that we were not doing enough. And so I created within the California Department of Justice a division that I named the Bureau of Children's Justice. And it is through that division that I actually started asking the hard questions of counties and others about whether they were actually in compliance with ICWA, and also doing the work of investigating whether or not they were. And this eventually actually led to what we created, which was the ICWA Compliance Task Force, because to your point, I was all too aware that there was not compliance across the board. This is a fundamental issue. This is about the children of the tribes. It is about, one must understand that there are a variety of issues that are also and should be part of our sense of responsibility around how those children end up in foster care systems. And but the reality of it is that they should not just be lost in the system. We must understand this is about, again, preserving not only sovereignty for the tribe, but preserving the future, and with an acknowledgement of the importance of making sure these children know and have their rightful connection to the tribes. And so I feel very strongly about it. I think of it as a civil rights issue. So it is not only about compliance with ICWA and making that a priority, because ICWA doesn't matter if we don't enforce it and if we don't audit it to make sure that people are complying with it. But the second piece of this is the laws that apply to ICWA in terms of the rights of the families and the rights of those children are complicated, and not all the judges know it and understand it. And so part of the issue for me is also making sure that in my capacity to appoint members to the bench, just to your point about that court case, that we look for people who are familiar with these laws so that we can make sure that when these cases get to a courtroom, that justice actually occurs.
Thank you.
Senator, this is Mark Graham, the moderator, and I just want to follow up a little bit with that. There are 3,600 roughly Article 3 judges, and one of them is a Native American. What can we do to get better representation in the federal judiciary?
We need a new president. and a president who understands this. I mean, listen, I've seen these cases. In a courtroom, I understand how it happens. This is not some theoretical, intellectual conversation for me. I've seen it. I've seen those babies, those children. I've seen the family members try to make sure that the culture and that there are reasons we have ICWA which is that so many children have been displaced, again, because of the historical treatment of the tribes by this country. And so, again, this is not something that is just I've read about. I know it, I've seen it, and I feel very strongly. You know, there is so much, I think, about public policy that you can judge based on how it treats a child. And ICWA, at its core, is just that point. It is about how the Native people have been treated. You know, ICWA is a real symbol of the mistreatment and the abuse. And so I feel very strongly about it. So it is about appointing judges who understand this and understand the impact on families, on communities, and overall on the tribes.
Our last question comes from Russell Buster Edeberry from the Turek tribe.
Ayuki Hukich Nityanamum. Hello, how are you? My name
How are you doing? Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here.
We're all busy. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Again, my name is Buster Adberry. I'm chairman for the Karuk tribe, and we are just upriver from the Yurok tribe, and we're the second largest tribe in California, and the Yurok tribe is the largest tribe in California. So it is a well-known fact that Native Americans' lifestyles have been one that reflects a balance between the environment and Mother Nature. The environmentalists want to keep people out and do nothing to protect and preserve Mother Nature. The corporate world wants the socio-economic approach, money first. Native Americans advocate for a socio-ecological plan first, and the economics will follow. Native Americans have a unique relationship with Mother Nature. We have lived here sustainably for thousands of years. Tribal ecological knowledge is a lifestyle. Land management practices are a form of our religion. People who live here have lived here that long. I'm not done. If you lived here that long, have been keen observers of our environment and acquired a wealth of ecological knowledge. Even though we have not had meaningful consultation, the Karuk tribe and others have not sat by idly and twiddled their thumbs. The Karuk tribe has developed a TREX program, which is a training exchange program which educates different agencies on how to use fire to reduce the fuels for the devastating fires that we have had. This is a practice that the tribes used for thousands of years until 100 years ago when it was against the law. We have also developed a comprehensive forest adaptation plan. Today, our forests are burning, our homes are burning, our rivers and tributaries are drying up and being polluted. Warm water temperatures and low flows are killing our fish. So with all this ecological knowledge that's out there, we should be able to bring a lot to the table. But with our flawed consultation process, sometimes we can't even get a seat at the table. And it needs to trickle down federal, state, and local, because a lot of times we have very difficult times. The consultation process and the idea that the tribes have something to offer is there, but it's sometimes blocked at the local level. So, my question, tribal consultation was initially made an official policy by the federal government by President Clinton's Executive Order 13175. The Bush administration failed to follow the policy, but the Obama administration issued a memorandum requiring federal agencies to engage in tribal consultation on issues impacting Indian country. Tribal consultation is best when the consultation is mandatory, feedback is made public, and metrics are used to determine whether or not feedback is implemented by the agency.
Right.
As president, how do you plan to revise, amend, and implement the tribal consultation executive order?
Well, first by bringing back the Tribal Nations Summit at the White House, and immediately, and by also requiring cabinet officials to engage in tribal consultation because there has to be some input at the front end in terms of impact, and also to your point in terms of best practices. I also will mention a bill of mine, I call it the Climate Equity Act, which would bring tribal and other frontline communities into our review process in terms of regulatory review to make sure that all of the environment and climate related legislation receives an equity score that will transparently estimate the impact on frontline communities. Because back to your point, we need to keep metrics and we need to measure it. It can't just be lip service, oh, we had a meeting. It also has to be that we measure whether there's actually been follow through and also outcomes.
Thank you, Senator. You have a couple of minutes if you want to make a last minute pitch, and let us hear what you have to say.
Well, I'll just say that I'm honored to be with you and all of the leaders who are part of this forum. And I can't thank you enough because your leadership is about, not only making sure that we speak truth about our history, but that we also acknowledge the relevance and importance to who we are today and who we can be. But I will tell you, and I promise you, to be a president who, on the issues of not only, again, the generations of violence and oppression, but also on the fact of the work that needs to happen to restore tribal lands and to address the historical trauma that has resulted from these abuses. I promise you I will be a president that speaks truth about these issues and acknowledges it in a way that is honest and is meant to require that the United States government fulfill its responsibility to acknowledge history and also to acknowledge the sovereignty of the leadership and the government-to-government relationship. And so I thank you for the time.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you.
Oh no, I did the wrong thing.
Is
It's
there
still
an outlet over here?
I don't know. Oh no, it's saying the thing again, so I'm gonna have to mute it again because the music is gonna demolish everything. I was Kamala Harris. Julian Castro's next.
Yep.
We are at the Frank Lamere Native American Presidential Forum, bringing you this coverage. Just want to point out, please pay attention to the questions being asked. That's really why I'm here to bring you this coverage, is to bring you more information about what's going on in Indian country. And so really important that that's kind of what people are thinking about. I understand people were mentioning a lot about Kamala Harris who's running for president, but just like the questions that are being asked, kind of what we're, at least I'm into right now. All these folks are gonna keep coming on stage. Julian Castro, and then I think Bernie Sanders is after that. I don't really know. But stick with us. We're gonna have to mute it again. I apologize for that, but we will be back. Hey everyone, did you want to say hello and just sort of like what we're just talking about, or introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Michelle Skywalker. My Omaha name is Gay. I'm from the Omaha tribe, from the Buffalo Clan. I'm the chairwoman of the Native Caucus for the Nebraska Democratic Party. And I was just discussing these guys that I was the main force getting these Democratic candidates to come, and how like I got Bernie Sanders to come. It was a funny story. You want me to tell it?
Yeah. So how'd that go down?
So I've been talking to Bernie's campaign since April. I've been helping them with other stuff to get into other tribes or other events, or just advising them on what to do. And when this came up, because I'm also like, I'm one of Frank Lamere's predecessors. I've been following Frank Lamere, Dr. Frank Lamere, since I was 17 years old. I helped him with white clay, and he got me involved with the Democratic Party. And he got me to run for chair of the Native Caucus of the Democratic Party. So when this came up, I remember Frank telling me in the spring, he's like, we're going to have a presidential candidate forum in the city. And he'll call me up and tell me things like that. He's like, I'll tell you more later as it comes closer. Well, as we know, Dr. Frank Lamere passed away in June, and we're still like mourning and heartbreaking over that. But when the news article came out of this, I was like, I remember him telling me this. So I called Brent Healy, who's the main coordinator, and he told me, he's like, I've been waiting for your call. So as chair of the Native Caucus, he asked me to get the Democratic candidates as much as I can. And so, of course, I started, telling Bernie Sanders' campaign. And then one day he popped up saying he's going to be in Council Bluffs, Iowa, and that's right next to the city of Omaha, Nebraska. So I got up early. I got my son up early, because one thing that Frank taught me was, he's like, they're not going to invite us to the table. You got to bring yourself. Yeah. So I got up early. Took my sons and put on Facebook, I'm going if anyone want to come. So everybody thought I was moved early, so they left on Lincoln too. But I got there because I knew the volunteers can meet there at 8. And so I got there and I acted like I was a volunteer until they realized I wasn't doing nothing. And they said, well, are you a volunteer? And I was like, no, I'm not a volunteer. And they're like, well, the volunteer, if you're not a volunteer, you got to sit outside or go. There's a coffee shop down. Do you want to get coffee? I was like, no. You sure you don't want to go anywhere? I was like, no. Well, you can't be in there. I don't care. I'm sitting down right here. And I sat down. I was like, I'm waiting for Bernie. And they're like, okay. And they left me alone. And my son's like, how can you do that, Mom? I was like, they're volunteers. What they're going to do? But my mission was to talk to Bernie right face to face. And like, I knew if I asked him face to face, are you coming or not? That puts it on all the cards on the table. So when I met him, like I said, he's all excited to shake my hand. And I started like, are you coming to the first Native American Forum or not? I need to know. I need to know right now, Bernie. And he got scared. He's like, I want to go. I just don't know my schedule. Here, talk to my Iowa campaign manager. And she said, yes, we got the schedule. We're planning to go. So she gave me my contact information, which I turned it over to Brent. And he's locked in the deal. And so because of that, I know Brent, because it's nonpartisan, I can't really be up there on the stage. I can't do much because it's a nonpartisan event.
Yeah. Republican candidates were also invited.
Yeah, Republican candidates were invited. Trump was invited, but we all knew he wasn't going to come.
Yeah.
But since it's a nonpartisan event, I told him, I was like, well, there's not much I can do, like introduction or anything like that, because I'm chair of the Democratic Party for the Native Caucus. I was like, I want to sit where I want, so.
All right, cool. Well, thanks so much for that story. How do you think this is going, or like, how do you think the event's going?
I think it's great that we're going live. Yeah. I think we should have test run it yesterday because we was having trouble, but for everybody in Native country, it's great to have this for them to see this, because one thing Frank Lamere was pushing, that he said that we can run for office, we can be in leadership, we need our voices heard, we need to be at that table. And so that was why he was involved for the Democratic Party for a long time. And he created the Native Caucus for the Nebraska, and he helped establish the National Native Caucus for DC. So now we're nationally recognized. And I think there's only maybe about 5 Native caucuses for the Democratic Party across the United States. And I talked to some of those chairs, and it's important that we need to bring our voices heard, because, as much as we know we don't want to, with the historical trauma our history is, people don't want to get involved, but we need to get involved. Because look what Trump did. With that government shutdown, that hurted a lot of tribes this year. And so I had to go protest my congressman, because I was like, hey, you need to help us and stop this, because Congress is the one that deals with the tribes.
Yeah, there was
So it's important to people to get out and vote. This is the only way we're going to win, if we vote Trump out. And so we're giving this opportunity to get all these different candidates to the platform to ask them questions that truly affects us as Native Americans all over, in the cities, on the reservations, everywhere. like what affects us Native Americans the most. 'Cause we know we're the minorities of the minorities. We know we have murder and misindigenous women. We know all this. I was like, well, we need new leaderships who's going to take charge and change this.
Right on. And what was your name one more time?
Michelle Skywalker.
Right on. So, and it's like a journalist is here covering this thing. I'm Lorenzo. I'm right here. I don't know who Frank Lamere is, and that's terrible, but I have learned who he is, and how important he was to this community, and also we're influenced by him, and everything. So this person has left all of these roots here, and they're growing into plants. I don't know why I said it like that.
It is.
But you can see it. You can see it in all the people who are speaking and all the people who are talking about him and how he was influential and has led to you being here and sort of done this work to bring these candidates here.
Yeah.
So
because Frank, he was, like I said, I started following him since I was 17 years old. I never knew about White Clay, Nebraska until he came to our class and told us. And we had a speaker panel rally at the University of Nebraska. Then we marched to the governor's mansion to protest. And ever since then, I followed him. And it wasn't easy. I was there when Frank got doors slammed in his face, when politicians and people told him no, when Native people, even our own Native people told him, stop doing this. And they're never going to shut it down. They're not even our tribe. And everybody's like, Michelle, why do you keep following this man? Because every time I'll be like, oh, Frank Lamere's in town. I'm going to the rally. And then eventually he started calling me, say, I'm gonna be here tomorrow doing this and that. I want you to spread the word. And so, like I said, gradually, I got more and more involved and helped him. And the interesting part, when the day it was taken to the Supreme Court, Nebraska Supreme Court, to try to overrule renew those licenses. And the decision was being made in that September. I got up early to go check out because I thought they were going to say it in court. Well, here, nobody was in court, and I looked at the court, the clerks, and I opened the door, and I was like, are they going to go in session? Because it starts at 8. And they're like, no, they already gave us the announcement. You want to read it? I was like, yeah. And they said, but you can't tell anybody till 8. You can't say anything. So there, the judge is like, no, we're not giving back the liquor license. So at 8 o'clock that morning, I called Frank Lamere right up, and I was like, they're closing it. They're keeping it closed. He's like, what? I was like, yes. He's like, where are you at? The state capitol? And he's like, who's all with you? And I was like, just me and Moses. Yeah. And so Frank was so shocked because he said that's the first he ever heard news so fast about White Clay. But he also told me, he's like, Chandra, there's something. He always called me by my first name, Chandra. Yeah. He's the only one that ever done that. All these years I've been following him, it's always Chandra. So he said, Chandra, there's something bigger going on here, bigger between me and you this day. I will think about it and talk about it. Now, he was a great thinker like that. He'll sit and think before he made his actions and moves. Yeah. And so later on the road, he was speaking at another panel, and he said that day what happened was when I called him up for an announcement that White Clay was not going to be reopened again. He said he believed the 7th generation prophecy had came to full term. And it's up to the youth now to take leadership. And so that's why he stuck up for the youth child here. He helped many children here in Sioux City and everywhere. So he really believed in the 7th generation prophecy. Now he believed it came to full term when we shut down White Clay.
And there's a lot of people who are involved in that.
Yeah, a lot of people on both sides. On both sides.
And then if you don't know, White Clay is a border, it is a border town right next to the Pine Ridge Reservation, about 8 miles away, right along the border. When the treaties were first signed, there was supposed to be no settlements that close to the reservations. That one was put there specifically to peddle in alcohol. It was literally in the founding little words of it. Big movement sort of trying to get rid of it because that was funneling in sort of alcohol into the reservation. That strip of road had just countless deaths.
Yeah, it was just a 1 mile strip.
It was a 1 mile strip.
It was 1 mile strip from the Pine Ridge Reservation. The town only had maybe 15 people, but they had 4 off-sale liquor stores. Yeah. And so they made millions. Nebraska made millions each year off of the sales, even though Pine Ridge is supposed to be the poorest county. And it got so bad where every 1 in 4 babies were born fetal alcohol syndrome. And so in 2000, Frank went up there to go help his Ames brothers. They asked him to go help, and he seen that. And he made that step over where they all got arrested. He took that one step and got arrested. And ever since then, he was advocating for over 20 years to shut down White Clay. And like I said, there's a lot of us that helped him on both sides, from the Oglala Tribal Nation and the people here in Nebraska. It was a collaborative effort. And pretty soon I pushed it to be a nonpartisan effort to get Republicans and independents and libertarians involved, because I told them, I was like, this is Nebraskan issue. All Nebraskans should be mad about White Clay.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, thanks so much for telling us that story and talking to us. I think I'm going to mute the mic now, I guess. Okay. But yeah, so that was it. We'll try to bring some people in to talk about That was just Kamala Harris. We didn't talk about Kamala Harris at all, but that's fine. We talked about Frank Lamere, who helped throw this.
Yep.
He started the momentum, and people are following through basically on.
Remember, get out to vote. 2020 vote. The primaries this November. Get out to vote. Like Joy Brown said, save your pennies now. Do what you can, register now, but it's important that we vote. So everybody just get out to vote.
Yeah. The Non-Native Vote 2020 pinnage out here, and we're at the Native Forum. I'll show you the little signage right there. All right, everybody, we're going to get muted for a little bit now. We'll be back again. Thanks for joining us. We're going to keep bringing you the coverage here of the first ever Frank Lamere Native American Presidential Forum 2019. Next we have Julian Castro. Again, thanks for joining us. And again, thanks for our support. This would have been impossible without our donors, so thank you so much for getting this here. Mute. Oh, I didn't put that. What's up, everyone? We're back now. This is going to be Julian Castro is up next. You're watching this on Unicorn Ride. Thanks a lot to our Facebook viewers, YouTube viewers, Periscope, and live stream. Please keep liking and sharing the feed. Again, we are a non-profit educational platform. We don't commercialize any of this. The only way we function is through donations, viewer donations, and grants, and all that. So thank you so much for all the donations. Our patrons, the people who have given us crypto, you have making this possible, and we thought it was important here to hear the questions being posed by Indian country. So please spend some time listening to the candidates, but also spend some time listening to what is being asked of them.
Hope. Wanasaji Dadeshis, Nemashwaki. My name is Wanasaji, also known as Christina Black Cloud. I am from the Meskwaki Nation, over in Meskwaki Indian Settlement, near Tama, Iowa. I see a lot of familiar faces. I've met quite a few of new friends and reconnect with old ones. So, I am introducing Julian Castro. I'm very honored to introduce him. He has recently visited my homeland in Meskwaki Nation, and I have formally, personally endorsed him as a candidate for President of the United States. The reason behind I had formally endorsed him personally is that he's looking forward to partnering with Indian communities. He's also served as the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President Barack Obama. And most of all, he supports VAWA, the Violence Against Women's Act. I know several years beforehand, or in 2010, I had written a letter of support for VAWA to this district, District 4, talking about it against Steve King. So VAWA is very important. So Julian Castro served as United States Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President Barack Obama from 2014 to 2017. Before that, he was mayor of his native San Antonio, Texas, the youngest mayor of a top 50 American city at the time. Many of us in the room that I have seen was at the Democratic National Convention in 2012. See, that's where I met a lot of the people that I'm involved with on a political level is at the Democratic National Conventions. So at the 2012 National Democratic Convention, he was our keynote speaker and gave a rousing speech. In 2018, Castro founded Opportunity First. Little Brown published Castro's memoir, An Unlikely Journey, Waking Up from My American Dream. And on January 12, 2019, Secretary Castro announced his candidacy for the President of the United States. If you have not seen his platform, his very detailed platform focused on Indian country, I would suggest to go to his website and look it up. His platform is right here. It says, confront the past, fight for a better future. And I believe that's what we all have to do, is unite, come together, and fight for our future, especially now. With that being said, I want to welcome Julian Castro to the great state of Iowa.
Good afternoon. First of all, let me say a huge thank you, gracias, to Christina for the introduction and for your support. It was wonderful to get to visit with members of Meskwaki recently, and it's wonderful to join you here today. I just wanted to make sure that I begin by thanking all of the tribes who had a role in putting this forum together, for those of us who are presidential candidates, and to acknowledge the uniqueness and how special this moment is. I also want to just say a special thanks to those whose lands we are on today, the Omaha, the Ponca, the Dakota, and the Winnebago. Thank you very much. Thank you for hosting us. I want to thank our water protectors, those who have been fighting for clean water. Thank you for your work. I also, of course, want to say a personal thank you to Oliver and Barb Siemens for organizing this wonderful forum. Gracias, thank you. I want to recognize and honor and pay tribute to the legacy of Frank Lamere for his steadfast work on behalf of indigenous peoples. And finally, to all of you, each and every one of you who are here, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm Julian Castro, and sometimes I feel like I need a name tag because I have a twin brother. Some of y'all may have seen him. My brother Joaquin likes to go around telling people that I'm just a little bit uglier than he is, which is not true. But you know, my brother Joaquin and I grew up on the west side of San Antonio with my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother had come from Mexico when she was 7 years old with her little sister because their parents had passed away. And she ended up on the west side of San Antonio, never got a formal education because they yanked her out in elementary school. She worked as a maid, a cook, and a babysitter. Raised my mom as a single parent. My mother raised my brother and me as a single parent. We're proud products of the public schools of Texas. Had the opportunity to go to college together and law school together, become the first in our family to be professionals as lawyers. We went to college and law school together because I can't get rid of my brother. And then to go into public service. I served on the San Antonio City Council, and then as mayor of San Antonio, and then as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President Obama. It was during my time as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development that I had the opportunity to work with 100 different communities in 39 states, including tribal communities. In Oklahoma, in South Dakota, Pine Ridge, I visited Turtle Mountain, had the opportunity to participate in the Tribal Nation Summit and to get a sense of the many opportunities and also very deep challenges that indigenous communities face in the United States. I'm proud that I became the first 2020 candidate to put forth a platform to address the concerns of indigenous communities in this presidential cycle. And I know we're going to have a question and answer, really, and I wanted to spend more time listening and responding to questions that people have. But let me just say, I'm running for president because I have a new vision for the future of our country. Because I believe that everyone counts. My first trip after I announced in January was not to Iowa or to New Hampshire, it was to San Juan, Puerto Rico, to tell the people of the island that we were thinking of them as they recovered from Hurricane Maria. I've pledged to visit all 50 states, and I'm here today because I believe that everybody counts, and that if we're going to create a more prosperous America, we need to ensure that we listen to the voices of indigenous peoples, our first people, and that we actually come with humility and respect and a willingness to partner and recognize the sovereignty of our tribal nations, to make investments in education, in healthcare, in ensuring that all Native people can have a safe, decent, and affordable place to live, that we do things like respond to the fact that you had 5,700 missing and murdered women and girls over the last several years, and that we ensure that we take that seriously. So I look forward to a conversation on how we can make sure that even though we can never go backward and completely right the wrongs of the past, and there have been so many wrongs when it comes to our indigenous communities, we can create a better future with leadership that comes with humility and with respect and understanding, and is willing more to listen and to learn than to talk, and most especially is willing to act with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Castro. We'll begin with a question from an elder, Marcelo LeBeau.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here and to listen to you, sir. We do have a big problem back on our reservation, on the Cheyenne River Reservation. And in my opinion, there's a pervasive sadness that exists there because of Wounded Knee and what happened there. There were close to 250 women and children that were massacred there at Wounded Knee. And the main leader was sick with pneumonia, and he was shot. The 7th Cavalry soldiers were awarded 20 medals of honor for that massacre, and some even called it a battle. And so the question today is, will you support the removal of the STAIN Act, which is, of course, Wounded Knee?
Thank you very much, ma'am, for the question. That is a shameful part of this country's history. And I absolutely do support the Remove the STAIN Act to rescind those 20 medals of honor. And I have said that publicly. I support that. I believe that that's the right thing to do. So thank you for the question.
Our next first question comes from Chairman White from Jacob.
Good afternoon, Secretary. My name is Frank White, and in some circles they call me Francisco Blanco. My question pertains to appointments. The presidential political appointments, including White House, judicial, agency, and cabinet appointments must be knowledgeable and experienced in issues impacting Indian country. Too often, however, appointees lack experience in Indian country. In federal courts and in the Supreme Court, we see troubling trends. Because federal Indian law is litigated with astounding frequency, Supreme Court and federal judges with experience, expertise in federal Indian law is essential to uphold tribal sovereignty. As President of the United States, how will you ensure your administration includes Native American appointees? Specifically, will you make history and appoint a Native American to a cabinet-level position? Will you include support of tribal sovereignty as a prerequisite for judicial candidates?
Thank you very much for that question, Mr. White. Mr. Blanco. Thank you for the question. I believe that an effective administration needs to look like America. And that hasn't always been the case. There have been some administrations that were better than others in reflecting the beautiful diversity of this country. But let me tell you what I would do. First of all, I would set up an Office of Presidential Personnel that is itself diverse, so that it understands how to reach into different communities and offer positions to people with the best talent from different communities, and people who are sensitive to the needs and to the concerns and to the issues of diverse communities, including indigenous communities. So from my Office of Presidential Personnel to the appointments that we would make up and down the court system at the district court level, the appellate court level, the Supreme Court level, and also in the cabinet, I absolutely would look to make sure that indigenous communities are well represented there, including in the cabinet, because I believe that it should look like America. I also know that when it comes to our judges, there are important issues that are being litigated every single term that intimately impact the quality of life and the future of indigenous communities. A good example of that is the Indian Child Welfare Act and the decision that the Supreme Court is going to have to make after a split district court and appellate court ruling on the constitutionality of that act. And we want people, whether they're at the Department of the Interior or anywhere in the cabinet and on the courts, that understand these issues. And so these issues that intimately impact indigenous communities will absolutely be part of our research when we consider a nominee, and something that makes a difference when I appoint a judge to the bench, whether that's at the district court, the appellate court, or the Supreme Court level, including also representation, because I know that that matters also.
Thank you. Put that into context, and you don't need to answer this. There are 3,600 Article 3 judges, and Diane Humptawad is the only federal judge anywhere in the judiciary. Next question comes from Stephen Rowe Lewis from Gila River, Arizona.
Scoop Tosh, Secretary, and I'm sure you remember, as Secretary of HUD, you came out to the Gila River Indian community. We're honored to have you there, and you talked. We had an opportunity to talk to you about, I know housing is a critical issue among Indian country, adequate housing and HUD funds as well. And thank you for speaking with us as tribal leaders while you were there on the Gila River Indian community. But my question to you, in recent years, the sovereignty of Indian tribes has increasingly come under attack. Most notably, the non-Indian adoption industry has continued to attack the constitutionality of the Indian Child Welfare Act and spread misinformation about ICWA by perpetuating negative and racist stereotypes of Indian families and tribal communities. In Arizona, my own community has had to fend off these attacks from the conservative Goldwater Institute. My father, the late Rod Lewis, was one of those early attorneys with John Echohawk and the Native American Rights Funds that fought to protect ICWA and fought to get ICWA into law. He also, thank you for talking about our water, our O'odham language, it's our Shuda, the water protectors as well. My father, when we talk about first, he was the first Native American in Arizona to pass the bar exam and to also argue a case. The first Native American attorney to argue a case in the U.S. Supreme Court and to win. That was in 1982, Central Machinery versus Arizona. So protecting our children, our future survival of our people is a fundamental component of sovereignty. As president, what would you propose as a potential solution to not only protect Iguana, but to broadly preserve and strengthen tribal sovereignty?
And thank you very much for the question. I do remember our visit, and thank you for hosting us. I very much appreciated it, and getting to visit with you and with the tribal leaders and understand more about the community. And I know that there's a very shameful history behind why ITWA was necessary in the first place, that we never want to go back to. In fact, as you pointed out in your question, we only want to strengthen ITWA. So here's what I would do. Number one, I would make sure that folks know that I support the Indian Child Welfare Act as president, and go out there and campaign on how important it is to preserve it and why it was necessary in the first place. And as you say, even today, these stereotypes, these caricatures, the disregard for Native peoples is still too prevalent in many quarters. Let me just also say that one of the things I believe is that in our textbooks, in every single classroom in America, we need to be teaching about Native history and doing it from a perspective that is truthful and accurate and does justice to the contributions of Native peoples in this land. So I see part of the problem here as, of course, we will defend that act, and I will work with Congress to try and expand it and strengthen it. If for some reason it's judged to be unconstitutional, I hope that doesn't happen, but if that did happen, then we would work to fix it and to strengthen it with Congress. I believe that on January 20th, 2021, we're going to have a Democratic president, a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic House. And we're going to have an opportunity to do some things that we need to do. But in the longer run, and you know this better than I do, there are many people, and I know for generations, whose families have fought these battles. You know this a lot better than I do. We need to create in the United States a youngest generation that learns to appreciate the differences among us and the different histories of people in this land. And I'm absolutely committed to making the investment for them to do it and to work with states so that our young people do learn that history.
Thank you, Secretary Castro.
Our next question comes from Brandon Stevens, Oneida.
Good afternoon. Sigli Swagwe, Lucas Nukiats, Wiganeta, Niwagita Loda, Union Aga Niwajoda. My name is Brandon Stevens. I'm the Vice Chairman for Oneida Nation. I represent 17,000 tribal members all over the world. As you may know, housing is an important issue in Indian country, and there's about 142,000 units across the country, and that's nowhere near the capacity that we need. The needs vary, but are in great need on the reservations, especially through the sequesters and the government shutdown. Programs like the 194 loan program stopped completely. We cannot close loans. Oneida, we're wholly owned Bay Bank. It's one of 19 tribally owned Native American banks across the country. We could not close any loans through the government shutdown, and so that has stopped home ownership for tribal members. As former Secretary of HUD, I know you have a lot of experience. As President, how would you use HUD and other federal agencies to better support the development of new housing in Indian country, particularly on tribal lands? And on a related note, how would you help address the high cost and other barriers of entry to home ownership market for Native peoples?
Thank you so much for the question. The deepest poverty I mentioned that I ever saw during my time in HUD was on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And I saw there one home that had 12 or 13 people living in it, small home, and another that had 17 people living in it, including 2 families that lived in the basement. And their room, so to speak, was separated by a bed sheet. That was their divider. And during the time that I was there, I heard about, and then I learned in other communities as well, the fact that for so many indigenous communities, the housing stock is old, it's dilapidated, falling apart, and there hasn't been a significant investment in a long time to create new housing or improve the housing that's there. I've called for a $2.5 billion investment in Indian housing block grants, as well as other federal funding to create new housing supply on indigenous lands, tribal lands, and so that we can renovate and repair the housing stock that is there already. Because one of the things I also heard is that, and I heard this in other communities around the country too, just because something's old and a little bit broken down doesn't mean that people don't have pride in it. Sometimes people want to stay where they are. And so we need to make that possible too. I also believe that we need to invest again in Section 184 to make home loans possible at a very low interest rate for Native communities. Because y'all know what happened in the housing crisis. There was this narrative that took hold that was not really, didn't accurately reflect the problem. The narrative that took hold, especially among a lot of right-wing Republicans, was that a whole bunch of people got loans that they shouldn't have. Basically, the people of color got loans, and that's what caused the problem with the housing market. When it's that these banks and financial institutions were getting theirs and passing off these products that they couldn't even control, and drove it into the ground. But what happened for everyday people is that nobody could get a home loan anymore. You go into a bank, even with good credit, and you couldn't get a home loan. I would reinvest in 184 and similar programs and expand those, and also use the power of the FHA where we can. Because we also know, I know, that indigenous communities are not monolithic, that more than half of Native people in our country don't live on tribal lands. They live out there. And so we need to be responsive to both of those communities, and I will be. In addition to that, I would just say briefly, I know that all of these things are connected. One of the things that I had heard very clearly at Turtle Mountain and at Pine Ridge was that it's not only about housing, it's also about jobs and opportunity there on tribal lands. We did a promise zone at Pine Ridge, which tries to work holistically on housing, on economic development and job creation, on transportation. People told me, look, to get to the employment centers, around here, we're gonna need transit. You need better transportation options. And so what I would like to do is to work with tribal communities to connect all of those dots together. Housing investment, transit investment, job opportunities, and education, so that we improve overall quality of life. That's what I would do as president.
Our next question comes from Harvey Godwin from Lumbee.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question that you've touched on a little bit. I read your platform, People First Indigenous Communities Policy Platform, and it's very comprehensive, the most comprehensive I've seen, so thank you for that. The Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina receives funding through the Native American Housing and Self-Determination Act, housing, which you know a lot about, under HUD. In 2008, the Department of Housing and Urban Development Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing Program was initiated, HUD-VASH. The Lumbee Tribe was awarded 20 HUD-VASH vouchers as a part of our tribal HUD-VASH demonstration program to provide housing to American Indian veterans living in our territory who are homeless or at risk of being homeless. As of today, through the collaboration between the Lumbee Tribe Veterans Affairs Office and the Veterans Administration in Fayetteville, North Carolina, home of Fort Bragg, The Lamere tribe has housed 20 Lumbee and other Native homeless veterans with a waiting list of 22 more. We hope we are awaiting additional vouchers. In addition, we are 1 year into our Disabled Veteran Outreach Program, helping Native veterans find jobs, funded through U.S. Department of Labor Vets. And whereas it's been spoken here today, Native Americans serve our military as the highest percentage per capita of any group in America. Secretary Castro, what would you do as President of the United States of America to fully fund and get passage through Congress the much needed appropriations to ensure that no Native veteran is without dignified, safe, clean, affordable housing and a livable income?
Thank you very much for that question. I'm very proud that when I was at HUD, I was there from the middle of 2014 till I left on January 19th, 2017. I wanted to get out of town a little bit early, a day early for the administration. I'm very proud that we worked to end veteran homelessness. And between 2010 and 2016, during the Obama administration, we reduced it, and I was part of this, wasn't there the whole time, but we reduced it by 47% in our country. And when I was there, we amped up the tribal HUD bash to make sure that in Native communities that we had enough vouchers. But we never quite got to the number that we would like. And so I see that as unfinished business. I have a plan as part of my housing plan to invest in Native communities, including on ending homelessness, that is consistent with an overall plan to end homelessness in our country by 2028. And that sounds ambitious because it is, but just think about that. During those 6 years, 7 years, between 2010 and 2016, we almost cut veteran homelessness in half. That means to me, that tells me that if Washington really wants to do it, if we want to work together, Republicans and Democrats, to appropriate the resources that are necessary, if communities are following the best practices like Housing First and a coordinated entry system and by list names and really doing a caseworker model and finding people who are homeless and getting them a voucher, then we can drive down that number of homeless. And that's especially important for Native communities that often were overlooked, a lot of times are not close to a big city, right? And so I recognize the particular challenges there, and my pledge to you is that if I am president, that I absolutely am committed to pushing Congress to dedicate the resources to end Native veteran homelessness, and for the administration to coordinate with tribal communities so that we make sure that this is done well. I have called for, whether it's at HUD or other departments, strengthening our tribal liaison for those departments, reinstituting what President Obama did with the Tribal Nations Summit, and a White House Indigenous Council, so that we have better ways to hold our administration accountable for progress or lack of progress, but hopefully progress in Native communities. I will do that.
Our next question comes from Jason Cook, Yankton. Remember to hold the mics close to your mouth.
Yes. My question is going to be on indigenous immigrants. There's a photo of children in cages and stories of the wretched conditions at detention facilities in the U.S.-Mexican border. Immigration is increasingly at the fore. A less discussed aspect of immigration, however, are the unique challenges faced by indigenous immigrants who speak neither Spanish or English. The U.S. government does not track data on indigenous immigrants, and indigenous language interpreters are often unavailable to serve people who cross the border in Latin America. 560 indigenous languages are spoken by 780 different tribal communities, most of whom are not adequately served when they cross the U.S.-Mexican border. As president, how do you plan to address the unique needs of indigenous immigrants, especially in terms of access to interpreters? But to add to that, what are your thoughts on our water protectors being put in cages and standing up to hold down?
person, I think like all of us, it makes me angry. It makes me angry and sad to see what this president and his administration have done, because they've chosen cruelty intentionally. They don't have to be cruel like that to these folks, but they've chosen that. In April, early April, I put out a very different vision for immigration. And so let me just answer the question in the context of that. Here's what I would do on immigration, including with regard to indigenous immigrants. Number one, I would stop playing games with people who get to the border. Right now they have this policy called metering, where they're not honoring people's ability to make an asylum claim. I would ensure that we do a much better job with translators and the ability to communicate with what are a whole array, as you said, of people coming from different indigenous communities, whether they're in Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Mexico, other places. And as you know, when it comes to translation, you know, it's finding people that understand the language, but also with technology, it's more convenient than ever to facilitate translations. We need to be able to invest in that infrastructure down at the border. I would do that. I would stop playing games and let them make their asylum claim. I would end the Remain in Mexico policy. I would end the family separation, zero tolerance policy immediately. And I would stop putting these children on cold concrete floors, sleeping with these Mylar blankets that look like aluminum foil, and instead invest the resources in finding the relatives that often live here in the United States and who want to be a sponsor, and do the vetting process much more quickly so that children, if they're really unaccompanied minors, they can get up to those families and live with them. In addition to that, I would put all undocumented immigrants, as long as they have not committed a serious crime, on a pathway to citizenship. Our dreamers and their parents, but not only them, all undocumented immigrants who have not committed a serious crime. And I would get to the root cause of the challenge and partner with Central America so that we help ensure that people can find opportunity and safety at home, so they don't have to make a desperate journey to the United States in the first place. We have a role to play in doing that. And I'm not naive. As you know, the United States has a very checkered history when it comes to Central America. In some ways, we helped create the challenge that we face today with 150,000 people in the last couple of months coming to the border. That means we have a responsibility to do something positive down there. And if I'm president, I will focus like never before on trying to do that with respect and in partnership with Central American countries. I also believe that it's important that when somebody is here in the United States, that that ability to communicate and translation, that should be available in our court system, immigration court system. Part of my plan is to create an independent immigration judiciary that has more judges and support staff, including translators, to be able to go through the asylum claims and the other cases more quickly, so that we can get people an answer, and they're not waiting in limbo for years and years for that answer. And then also, to ensure that people have the opportunity here to work, to provide for their family, and that they have the services they need to be able to do that.
Our next question is Harold Fraser from Cheyenne River.
Thank you. Harold Fraser, Chairman of Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe. You know, I come down here an open mind and an open heart to search for that leader that will allow us Indian people to live like human beings. We are tired of being pushed down and under control by the government. You know, years back we signed treaties of peace, and we've been living by them. We laid our arms down. It's time that we want to be allowed to build a better way of life for our families and for our future. But it is so bad as an Indian today. There is no true self-determination. We want economic development. We have to ask the government to put our land into trust. We have to ask the government to allow us to build a casino. It is so bad that today we even have to ask the government to be an Indian. That's how bad we are being treated. And we are tired of it. You know, we were here first, but yet we're in the back of the bus. When are we going to drive that bus? Because we own that bus. You know, it's really sad. Back home, we have an elder gentleman. Every day he prays and hopes his daughter comes home. His daughter's name is Sharon Baudigo. She's been missing since 1983. You know, why do we have to have special laws for our missing and murdered women? Why? As President of the United States, how would you use your authority to address the missing and murdered Indigenous women crisis in Indian country?
Thank you very much for the question. And I know that how you feel and your sentiments are shared by very, very many people. Those of us who are not natives cannot fully ever understand it. But I want you to know that I deeply respect it. And that if I'm president, that I will work to do justice, to go on a different path from the many injustices that have been done over the generations, and that I recognize that. One of the things that I believe that we need to do, to get to part of your question, is that we need to work to give more authority to tribal communities to administer the initiatives that impact their people. And so I support the Progress Act, for instance, to make sure that we turn over more of the administration of programs to Native communities. I also support Savannah's Law, so that Native communities have more of the tools that they need to be able to investigate these cases of missing and murdered girls and women, and that the federal government gets more serious by investing resources for investigation, and by keeping track, by tracking the cases of missing and murdered women and girls who are natives, which we haven't done with the same kind of precision that you would if somebody was missing, that's non-native. I will look at every turn for how we can vest Native communities with as much self-determination as possible. I believe in it. I believe in doing what we can to right those wrongs, understanding that we never fully can, but that we can, I think, that we can start a stronger relationship, a stronger partnership, and one that is not just talk, but one that is also action, like the ones that I've laid out, of the changes in the law that we would make, of appointments that we would make of people, and of resources that would be invested, and administration of those resources more in the hands of actual tribal communities instead of just the federal government.
Thank you. Our final question comes from Carolina Castrano Santana.
Zagote, buenas tardes and good afternoon.
My name is Carolina Castoreno Santana. I am the Executive Director of the American Indian Center of Indiana. I'm also a representative of the National Urban Indian Family Coalition. And I am Lipan Apache from the great state of Texas. So I want to thank you, first of all, for being a San Antonio Texan, Tejano, to be in the race period, but also to be here addressing Native issues. Thank you very much. My family personally has been in San Antonio since the inception of our existence. And so that is our ancestral home. It still is our home. So my question surrounds the topic of recognition, which kind of was already brought up. It's absurd to think that Indigenous people have to ask the federal government to identify ourselves with who we've always been. It's contradictory to the idea of sovereignty. And my tribe specifically has had treaties with the Spanish, Mexico, the Republic of Texas, and the United States, and we're still here today. So, thank you. Given that, there are a number of other state-recognized tribes in the United States, tribes that have no recognition from the federal government or are recognized by their state governments. Tribes may lack federal recognition for a variety of reasons, from the termination era to removal policies. State-recognized tribes often face bureaucratic red tape, obstacles to federal recognition, and limited sovereignty. So my question to you is, how will you help lessen the burden of state-recognized tribes across the country who seek recognition from the federal government and our right to our own self-determination?
Thank you very much for the question. It's good to see fellow Texans here and San Antonio. So right now, as I understand the federal recognition process, it is a mess. It takes too long. Oftentimes the recognition that tribal communities would want is not put into place at the federal level, or it takes too long to actually get that recognition. I want to make sure that we're investing in resources to follow the lead of tribal communities around the United States in ensuring that that federal recognition process is efficient and that it's fair. I know when I was at HUD, one of the things that we did was that we worked with tribal communities from across the country on some of the ways that funds would be distributed, the HASDA housing funds. And when my staff came to me, the perspective that I took was, look, we want to hear from our tribal communities. We want to listen to you. Sometimes those decisions right now are made, of course, at the federal level in Washington. But as much as I could, I wanted to make sure that we were listening to the wishes of tribal communities themselves. And when it comes to federal recognition, that is what I would do as well. In addition to making sure that we're investing and creating a process that doesn't take too long, that is not tangled up, and that fully reflects, I think, the wishes of tribal communities across the country.
Please thank Secretary Castro.
Thank you very much, y'all. Thank you very much. Gracias. Thank you. Thank you.
I said bad job. Okay, well, everybody, we have... Who's next? Bernie Sanders?
I don't know.
No.
John Delaney?
No, John Delaney went already.
Oh,
I think it's... Is it...
Burn Dog?
No, what time is it now? 5? Almost 5? What time is it?
If it's 5, yeah. Then...
Oh, it's 4. Who's it for? I don't know. There's more people coming up. Again, we have to keep muting the mic because the music is copyrighted, keeps shutting down our stream. We're here at the Native American Presidential Forum. That was Julian Castro, former HUD secretary under Obama, taking questions from Indian country here. All those questions having to do with Remove the Stain Act, talking about the medals of honor that are awarded to the soldiers who massacred people, women and children at Wounded Knee, and also saying they have to resend those. And also a lot of questions about murdered and missing Indigenous women. We're going to mute this so we don't lose the feed, but thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to our donors for making this possible. We'll be right back.
Their seats, I'd appreciate it.
I gotta sit down. All right, everybody, we're coming back. Again, I have to mute it. Say hello to Julian Castro here. Hello, yeah. Got it. Yeah. Unicorn Riot. Got a little hello from Julian Castro, right, for president. Again, they did ask Republican candidates. I think there's one besides Trump to come. Everyone was invited. So, all right, everybody. I think next is de Blasio. Everyone keeps changing the schedule. Music down. I guess.
What happened is they had a glitch, and so
I figured out.
couldn't get on right away. And so they asked me to come out, kind of kill some time, and so I was doing all this talking and stuff, and I got done, and I went to see my wife, and said, hey, let's go outside. She goes, why do you talk so much? They're not here to hear you. So just a reminder that you're always put back into reality when, when your soulmate tells you that you're getting carried away. So she probably heard it. So anyway, we got another candidate coming up, and I'm really, really happy that Indian country made this happen. So with that, I'll get off the phone.
All right, everybody. Thanks again for joining us here. We are at the first ever Native American Presidential Forum 2019. It's called Frank Lamere to honor Native American civil rights fighter who recently passed away. I think it was in June. A lot of people I've spoken to who helped organize this or directly connected to this person who helped sort of invigorate them to push them towards politics and also organizing, grassroots organizing. So really good to be here and learning more about the history of Frank Lamere and this Native American Presidential Forum, listening to the questions being put forth to these presidential candidates that have to do directly with Indian country. So here we go with the next panel. You'll notice it is made of different genders and usually ages, the kind of wide variety. Really important. And so you'll be hearing all of these different voices. We don't have any, some of them had the youth on them, so just really a wide variety of folks who are able to ask questions of these candidates from different tribes, different tribal affiliations, some federally recognized, some not recognized, all of them being able to speak and ask questions. So again, unprecedented, never happened before. Why we're here is Unicorn Riot. I am your host, Lorenzo, and we have John Z on the back end. Thank you so much for your support. Here is Chairman of the Sioux tribe, Harold Fraser. I think, it's Harold Fraser.
My name is Harold Fraser. I'm and I am running for president. I'm chairman of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. And in our tribe, there's 4 bands of the Teton Sioux. The Two Cattle, the Nobles, the Blackfoot, and the Minnekoju. And when Wounded Knee happened, the massacre, most of the people come from the Minnekoju. And some Hunkpapa from City Bulls Camp. And their chief was known as Bigfoot, but to us at home, his name was Spotted Apple. And it means a lot to our people back home, these revocation of these medals. Because there's no honor in murdering over 200 men and children and women, and 90 unarmed warriors. There's no honor in that. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce this next candidate, because he was the first to say yes for the revocation of these Medal of Honor. So at this time, I would like to introduce Mayor D. Blasio.
Chairman Frazier, thank you
Oh,
very, very much. And I want to start by echoing what you just said. To make change in this country, we have to come to grips with our history. A number of you may know that the reason I could not be with you today is that here in New York, we've been coming to grips with our own history in the last 24 hours. In the aftermath of the tragedy of Eric Garner's death. And yesterday, our police department, our police commissioner, making a decision that showed justice was served and ensuring there was accountability, and the officer involved was terminated. That is an example of change that's needed all over this country in terms of coming to grips with the mistakes of our past and creating justice where it didn't always exist, and proving that our institutions can actually serve people fairly, honestly. And so, Mr. Chair, when you spoke about Wounded Knee, we have an obligation, all of us in this country, to come to grips with that history too, to acknowledge that massacre, to acknowledge it does not represent anything that we say are our values, and it is absolutely unacceptable. Not only that that massacre ever occurred, but that then somehow it was celebrated by our military by giving the Medal of Honor to so many of the soldiers involved in something that today would be considered a war crime. And we have to remove the stain. I'm honored to be the first presidential candidate to accept that. But we have to bring this to the entire people of this country. Because we can move forward. The reason I'm running for president is I honestly believe we can move forward. And I am the mayor of the most diverse place on earth, and a place that has a history full of all these mistakes and challenges and sins, and also a history that proves how we can overcome. So I'm going to do everything I can to achieve the Remove the Stain Act, and as your president, I will use all my power to get it passed and to take away those medals and finally make history move in the right direction. The realities that everyone here deals with. I want to thank all of you, by the way. This forum is so important. It's an important moment in history that it's happening. I want to thank all the activists, all the leaders. I want to thank Four Directions. I want to thank everyone who's making it happen. I want to thank you also for fighting for justice all the time. For fighting for things that I believe in, like making sure people have the right to vote, which has not been honored in Indian country by too many state governments and our federal government. That has to end. The Native American vote has to be honored in this country, and when it is honored, this country will change. I pledge to work on that as your president. We have to end the disrespect for tribal sovereignty. And I say that as a mayor who understands that the government that's closest to the people serves the people best. Tribal governments have not been given the honor and the respect and the support they need. And therefore, a lot of people are suffering because the governments that could help them so much are not empowered and not supported. I have to tell you, the things I believe in for this country, I think would have such an impact to help change the reality in tribal lands, change the reality in Indian country. And it starts with universal health care. I think there's no community in America that would benefit more from universal health care than the Native American community, which has been deprived of both physical and mental health care for so long. And we know the current federal efforts are just absolutely paltry compared to the need. And so many things that I believe we need to do, things that are passionate for me, like reaching all of our children early in their lives, the support for education in Indian country from our federal government, just like all over this country, there's a fundamental mistake that education is not supported at a much higher level by the federal government. But in Indian country, again, I think would be disproportionately positive if our federal government committed to the thing we've done here in New York City. early childhood education for every child for free, which is a huge difference maker. Reaching our children young and helping them move forward. So, there are many things that we could discuss, but I'll conclude with this, and I look forward to your questions. And I'll say that I humbly have a good sense of what I know and what I don't know and what I have to learn. But one thing I learned early on, I was working for the first African-American mayor of New York City, David Dinkins. And I learned at that time that there was a community here in New York that many people didn't recognize, but there's tens of thousands of people, tens of thousands of Native Americans here in the nation's largest city. People from so many different backgrounds, from so many parts of the country, but with common cause. A lot of them gathered around the American Indian Community House, and almost 25 or 30 years ago, I was the liaison to the community from Mayor Dinkins City Hall, and I learned so much about the challenges all over this country, including in urban America, for so many Native people, and so many ways that we could do things differently. And I do believe change is possible. And I think it comes not only with forums like this and demands on all of us to step up and take the positions that would lead to change, it also comes with the political empowerment of Native American people on a scale we have never seen before. We know how many votes were suppressed. We know how much was done to undercut tribal governments, to undercut participation, to push away the voices of Native people in this country. It does not have to be that way. Imagine a country in which the Native American vote was supported, was energized. Imagine the Democratic Party doing all it should do to encourage and support and honor the Native American vote. When that day comes, we change this country, and I think it's our job to make sure that day comes for all of us in 2020. And I'm committed to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Our first question comes from Elder Marcella Laval.
Thank you. I'm from the Cheyenne River. I'm from the Cheyenne River Reservation. I belong to the Wahinupa land. In my opinion, we have pervasive sadness that exists on our reservation because of Wounded Knee and the unresolved grief. Our people still remember. They have horseback rides every winter, even during blizzards, from Standing Rock to Wounded Knee. And during the summer, we have motorcycle rides commemorating Wounded Knee. And also there are youth that walk back from Wounded Knee to Takini, where Bigfoot came. So I'd like to hear your words and your support. And my question is, will you support the removal of the STAIN Act? That's my question.
Yes. Yes, thank you. And what you said reminds us, it was not that long ago, in real terms, for us as humans, it was not that long ago. And that stain is felt deeply, as you just said, by people right now, and is holding us back. And it's a double standard we cannot allow. And I think there's so many people in this country, if they heard the history, if they saw what the military leaders even at the time said about what an atrocity this was. Anyone who looks at that history knows it's impossible that anyone was given a Medal of Honor. There was no honor. There was nothing to do with what honor is supposed to be. And we owe it to all the innocent lives lost to make it right. So remove the STAIN Act is absolutely necessary. And not only will I fight for it in the Congress, we have to educate the people of this whole country about this history. Because when people start to understand it, I think other things start to change as well. And I believe the more and more people in this country hear why we need to remove the STAIN Act, I think the faster the day comes when it passes the Congress and we can move forward.
Thank you. Not only are we living under the tyranny of colonialism, but also the clock. So, short answers going forward here.
Yes.
Our first question comes from Andrew Work from Port Belknap.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time, Mayor, out of your busy schedule, and for your public service. Like Mark said, I'm Andy Work Jr. I'm the president for the Fort Belknap Indian Community, Ani Nakota Tribes in Fort Belknap, Montana. So, my question revolves around economic development, tribal tax, and finance parity. Especially where you're at out there in New York is the financial center of this country. And I just wanted to mention something before I get to my question here that, as you know already, based on our treaties, like you hear here, we've heard over the last few days, that we're unlike any other group in this country. We're not a racial group. We're a political group, and that's what we'll always be. So, tribal governments have all the same responsibilities as any government: roads, schools, jails, trash collection. However, we don't have a tax base. Land is in federal trust, which cannot be taxed. Income tax is impractical, and states litigate over our sales tax constantly. So our governments have to participate in the private marketplace to bring in governmental revenue. We create tribally owned corporations to make money for our governments. Out east, you are most familiar with gaming, but out here we own grocery stores, gas stations, e-commerce, etc. But the federal tax and finance laws were written without tribes. Even during this current administration, as you know, there's been 2 bills, 2 laws passed for tax reform. And even though tribal leaders and tribal staff worked very hard, tribal advocates, to have inclusion for tribes, they were still left out. So we're being excluded from laws that benefit governments and excluded from laws that benefit corporations. It is impossible to pull yourself up with your bootstraps if you don't even get to play by the same rules. So my question is this: as president, how would you ensure that tribal nations and their tribal corporations are treated equally in federal tax and finance law? Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll be very quick. Again, as a mayor, I am absolutely sympathetic to the notion that the tribal governments have to be empowered and supported to be able to provide services to people and invest in communities and right so many wrongs. So crucial work we have to do immediately, a crucial mission, is to repeal the Trump tax bill, to repeal the Trump tax cuts, which were a giveaway to the wealthy and the corporations. And while we're repealing that tax legislation, we have an opportunity to address your issue, to give tribal governments the ability to raise revenue through property taxes, to give tribal governments the ability to issue bonds, to pay for infrastructure. It's absolutely contradictory that the United States government does not provide the support, and state governments obviously do not provide the support for Native American communities on tribal lands, and then deprive you of the ability to raise your own revenue. And so I would end that. I would say tribal governments get the right to issue taxes, tribal governments get the right to issue bonds, and then we can finally have the support you need to do the things that your people need.
Thank you, Art. Next question comes from Cheryl Andrews Malte, Wampanoag Tribe.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here, Mayor. My name is Cheryl Andrews Maltese, and I'm the chairwoman of the Wampanoag Tribe of Gay-Headed in Massachusetts on the island of Martha's Vineyard. And building upon what the chairman of Fort Belknap had mentioned, there are many laws that were enacted without the consideration of tribes or tribal governments. And so oftentimes, because of that fact, the tribes are left out of it. We were left out without consultation or even consideration of these laws. And the tribes deliver all different types of programs and services, whether they're social programs, health, education, infrastructure, and everything else that goes along with the federal government, unlike the local governments. Tribes provide everything, whereas the local governments only provide a small amount. And as was also mentioned, tribes are not able to tax our citizens. It's not that we can't tax our own people, but why would we be taxing our own selves doubly? Because our tribal members also pay taxes within the federal and state systems. But one of those laws that has been enacted is the National Labor Relations Act. And this particular law expressly exempts governments and government as employers from the local, state, and federal governments as employers to not tax their, as an exemption to recognize that the damage that labor stoppage and strikes could bring to governments. From 1935 to 2003, nearly 70 years, the National Labor Relations Board held that the statute would apply to tribes, although the tribes were specifically not mentioned. However, in 2004, the National Labor Relations Board changed that course and decided that it did not include tribes. So now tribes are expressly excluded from this exemption and protection. And since 2004, tribal governments have sought legislation to reverse the National Labor Relations Board's decision and provide clarity that tribal governments and governmental enterprises are excluded from the application of the National Labor Relations Act. Unfortunately, the legislation has repeatedly been caught up in misguided circumstances of pitting tribal interests against other constituencies, such as labor. And so labor is typically the prevailing winner, and tribes are usually the losers. So what we need to do is find out, our question is two parts. What is your position on this issue? And the other part is, would you support legislation to change this and/or instruct your Justice Department to defend and protect tribal sovereignty when it comes to labor and labor issues? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I would like to be honest about, the areas I don't know enough about, and this is certainly one of them, but I'll give you the other honest truth. Look, I do believe very, very strongly in the power and the meaning of organized labor. I think right now in this country, the decline of organized labor is one of the reasons why there's just vast income inequality, why so many people, working class people, are really struggling in this country. I think there's a direct connection. So I want to be honest with you and say, I really value the role that organized labor plays in society. And I actually think the federal government has in so many ways turned against organized labor in recent years, and that's unacceptable to me. But I think the issue of tribal sovereignty is very real. And so I would need to spend time with all of you and learn how we can strike some balance there. We always have to respect and support working people, and yet tribal sovereignty is just a fundamental underlying idea that I believe in. So I can't give you, I wish I had a simple answer or a straightforward answer that I knew the facts well enough to give you, but I can only tell you that I'm ready to learn and ready to figure out how you strike that balance.
Thank you, and just as a response, with that being said, tribal governments should be given the option. And tribes are often the best employer in the regions, and therefore tribes, as the best employer, know how to well employ their people. And so as long as tribes, and we have the support of your administration, should you become president, to work with us and find ways to get to respecting tribal sovereignty and our right to run our businesses and our governments the way we need to, while also respecting the rights of labor and labor organizations, but not imposing that upon tribes, but giving tribes the right to choose that if we so choose.
Thank you. I look forward to learning more about it and then talking to you more about it.
Thank you. And to the panelists, remember to hold it really close so the worldwide audience can get it. Our next question comes from Ruth Buffalo from the North Dakota Legislature.
Hiroshati Nakbaga O, Madashi Mea Adash Heads, Madashi Ruth Buffalo Heads, Mabe Sigits Ma Zigidads Nakbaga O. As a citizen of the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nation, my entire family still lives on and within the exterior boundaries of the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation, including my mom, my sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, nieces and nephews, and cousins. And so I am here to ask a question on behalf of a grassroots organizing group comprised of grandmas and moms called the Fort Berthold Power, Protectors of Water and Earth Rights. They have been consistently asking the question of trust responsibility with the federal government. So the trust responsibility, let me reword this. Fort Berthold Power has been consistently asking about the trust responsibility the federal government holds when it comes to tribes and energy development. The Bureau of Land Management and Bureau of Indian Affairs allow the wasteful practice of frack gas flaring, which has been proven to be a source of pollution, emitting volatile organic compounds, benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, xylene, and other known carcinogens. How do you plan to uphold the trust responsibility of protecting Indigenous people from the harmful practice of flaring within the exterior boundaries of our native nations?
Thank you very much for the question. I think this gets to the heart of not only respecting sovereignty and trying to uplift Native American people, but also respecting our earth and recognizing the danger that fossil fuels pose to us all the time. I'm someone who believes that while we have to absolutely respect people who work in the fossil fuel sector and come up with a very coherent vision of getting people new employment in renewable fuels and other much healthier parts of our economy, the bottom line is we have to get away from fossil fuels. And that's true to address global warming, or else everything else we care about is going to be academic. We have to address global warming urgently. I'm a believer in the Green New Deal, a believer in the day when there is no longer use of fossil fuels in this country and we convert fully to renewables. It will take time, it will take immense effort, but it can be done. Fracking is a tremendous danger to our water, to our environment in general. And it's also part of keeping a dependency on fossil fuels that's absolutely counterproductive. So I'm someone who has opposed fracking across the board. I would use my leadership to support efforts to end it and to respect tribal sovereignty at the same time. But I think it's really important to note that if we don't end it, if we continue to lean on fossil fuels, we're endangering our children and grandchildren. It's as simple as that. We have alternatives. We have to move to them now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Lester Thompson from Crow Creek.
Good afternoon. Mayor, my question is going to coincide with the young lady who's spoken before me here. I did a little bit of bio on you. I looked at your campaign from your first term. You ran off of campaign and you based it off of a tale of two cities, the haves and the have-nots. We live in a world that is of have and have-nots. We have big industry and the rest of us. As in reflection to her question of fracking and such, over 13% of homes in Indian countries lack access to a basic necessity, that is clean drinking water. Clean water is a basic human right and a vital necessity. Yet our water is polluted and our sovereignty is undermined by corporate interests and extract industries. Point in case, Keystone Pipeline, DAPL. My question to you is, what is your plan to protect tribal water rights and tribal waterways and put an end to the clean water crisis in Indian country? But not only in just Indian country, the point taken is Flint, Michigan.
Yeah.
I think we're making such an important point at the end there that this is something that I think there's such common cause, and we have to educate people about just how much We're all facing the same struggle, and it can't be that in one place people are deprived of the right to clean water. That is a human right, you're absolutely right. You can't have a deprivation of that right in one place and think that people someplace else are safe. That's not how it works. Everyone has to have that right, and the federal government has to step in aggressively to defend that right and ensure it. And that hasn't been the case. That wasn't the case in Flint, and that's not the case in Indian country. We have a federal government that once was the great environmental leader and now has walked away from that responsibility. I would reinvigorate all the tools we have to protect clean water. But with a particular focus on tribal sovereignty, I believe that when it comes to water on tribal lands, I have a great deal of faith that tribal governments would be good stewards, would protect the sanctity of that water, would protect that water as something everyone needs now and for the future in a way that corporate America never would. So, of course, I said that I oppose fracking, I oppose the Keystone Pipeline, the Dakota Access Pipeline, all the things that would undermine and endanger clean water, endanger the aquifer, and are about corporate greed, not about some larger public purpose. Let's be clear about that. And these things are done so recklessly. I think we think about the fact that water is the beginning of everything, and then we build a vision that is about protecting water first. And we do that by empowering tribal governments to have the rights they've not had before. Because you understand the danger, and you understand why we do things differently, we can actually protect our children and grandchildren. If we don't, we're on a very, very dangerous path.
Our next question comes from Julian Bearrunner, Oklahoma.
It was at Oklahoma that turned it off.
They did that on purpose.
Was that for dramatic effect?
Julian Bearrunner Imachiapilo na Chatewashte na Pen Chuzapilo. I want to first of all thank you, Mayor, for your time and attention into the issues in Indian country. But I also want to greet my elders that have sat here all day, that have brought their time and their energy and their support, and our young people that are sitting here, that are showing their interest in a better government and a better future, not just for Indian country, but for mankind. So I was proposed with a few questions, Mr. Mayor, and as a leader of my people, I'm the second youngest chairman elected within this IRA government since it was established in 1934. The last sitting chairman in the 1970s was Mr. Gerald Onefeather, who was a few years younger than I am. But as a young leader, I have so many issues in learning our history of our people, and doing cards and stuff like this didn't work well for me. And a spiritual leader from home has, always encouraged me to speak from my heart. And, and that has worked for me by following that advice, because I'm sitting here today, talking to you as an elected official of my people. So, today I'm going to do just that. And, these are important issues. One is the divestment in the fossil fuel industry. I went to jail in Standing Rock. We heard them talk about arresting our people and caging us like animals. And when that happened to me, I was a nobody. I was a regular person, just like everyone in this room. But today, as a tribal leader, I look back on we talk about the Remove the Stain Act, and I look back at the treatment of this government, and I tried to find a solution for all of our problems, because I have so many pressing issues at home. I have the threat of clean drinking water. I have an oil pipeline that's running over one of our running under a primary drinking source for my people. not only my people, but non-natives as well, that rely on that drinking source. So, that is one of the issues, and methamphetamine, is a huge crisis. Drugs, alcohol, all these, and I thought about it as a tribal leader, and the last time we had a perfect society, my people once lived in a perfect society, and it was before 1492. So trying to think of everything that took place from 1492 to today, has had a dramatic impact on my people. And, we talk about removing the STAIN Act, and I sat here and I prayed and I thought about it, and I appreciate you for supporting, the revocation of those medals. But, today we're faced with another stain. It's a different form, for those soldiers to have come and annihilated our people for living a way of life, which was such a perfect environment, trying to dictate, our way of life. And a big threat at home today is our Black Hills. The Black Hills are a spiritual center for my people. We rejected the money that was thrown at us, for the illegal taking of those hills. And, and so today as a tribal leader, what I want to know from you, because all these issues stem from what happened to us from 1492 to today. So what I'm going to ask is, what are you proposing to, return our lands to us and allow us to be, the true supreme law of our land? And let us dictate to us what is right for us. And let us, under your Constitution of the United States, Article 6 says that those treaties are the supreme law of the land. And if you would allow us to show and stand by and support us when needed, that we can prove to the world that it is possible to live in a perfect society. So I ask you, for your support and how you propose on, supporting our sovereignty and returning our Black Hills. But also, thinking and talking about me being arrested and standing around. I have a member of my tribe that is still behind bars for something that he was framed on. Just like how I was in Standing Rock, charged with criminal trespass on my own lands, engaging in a riot on my own lands when I was just praying. So understanding the negative impact that this government has had on us to make us look like the bad people just to get what they want. So I also am asking for the clemency for Leonard Peltier. Thank you.
I agree that that is a clemency that is long overdue. And there are some of these moments in our history that are particularly painful because there's not even a hint of justice. And the case of Leonard Peltier is one of them. And I will do anything I can to support you in seeking that clemency. In terms of how we make right the history, again, I always will tell you when I don't know the exact path, but that I think if we meet in mutual respect, the path often will become evident. The history referred to around the Black Hills must be answered. It can't be ignored. And I think the only way to do that is to have leaders of your community sit with leaders of the federal government to determine a path forward. I don't have an exact model, but I know in good faith there must be one, because I know difficult challenges have been faced before, and if people have a faith and have a belief in equality, there's a way to do it. So that's what I can say to you for sure. I know, and again, as someone who governs over the most diverse place literally on the planet, where there have been a lot of history that had to be addressed, I've found that people really can do it and really figure it out together if there's a spirit of justice. And that's what I would try to bring to this discussion.
Our next question comes from Lillian Dana. Penobscot.
Thank you. Hello, Mr. Mayor. I'm Lillian Dana. I serve as the appointed tribal ambassador for the Penobscot Nation in the beautiful state of Maine. And I'm honored to be here today to ask you about something very close to my heart, and that's Indian mascots. Eliminating racist and derogatory mascots and imagery has been a priority for the Penobscot Nation and many tribal nations and organizations. Research has shown that the continued use of these mascots allows people to feel that it is acceptable to participate in culturally abusive behavior and further perpetuate inaccurate misconceptions and untruths about us. We obtained a significant victory earlier this year when the Maine legislature passed a law banning Indian mascots from public schools and universities, becoming the first state in the country to do so. We also changed Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. We were busy up in Maine, I guess. Offensive Indian mascots plague schools and sports teams across the country. Over 2,000 high schools have Indian mascots. Even the Washington NFL team in the country's capital uses a racist anti-Indian slur as its mascot. The outright racism of Indian mascots has consequences, including negative psychological impacts. Studies show that Indian mascots damage the mental health and senses of self-worth and community worth for Native people. What is your stance on Indian mascots, and as president, will you institute a ban? Furthermore, what steps would you take to ensure that America's first people are no longer invisible within our own lands, to ensure that we are not marginalized, and to ensure that we receive the proper respect we rightfully deserve? Take your time.
You have been busy in Maine. Congratulations on the action on these mascots. This is something that is it's morally wrong, it's divisive, it's racist, it's outmoded, and there's so many things you could say. I want to tell you, not only am I someone who believes in justice, but I'm a sports fan, and I have seen teams, and this is part of what puts the lie to some of the arguments you hear on the other side. I've seen teams move from place to place and change their names effortlessly. And no one thinks anything of it. I've seen new teams created in new cities, and they come up with a name, and they have a naming contest, and everyone thinks it's great, they have a new name. There's just no reason on earth to continue to use racist names that denigrate people in our nation in a way that is not, I'm going to state what everyone knows, but I want to say it, out of real respect. We don't do this to other ethnicities. It's quite clear. This is a nation made up of all the ethnicities of the earth, but this particular phenomenon, if you saw other sports teams named after ethnicities, there would be an uproar. And it's not acceptable anymore. So I would use all the power I have, whether it's legislative, executive, or just the power of the bully pulpit of the presidency to say, it's time for this to end. It is absolutely unnecessary, and it's causing pain. And if the shoe were on the other foot, there are many people in this country proud of their heritage. If their heritage was being minimized and mocked with a mascot name, they would demand justice. I just want people to feel if the shoe was on the other foot, they would understand. And I think it's absolutely right. How could anyone watch that and not fear that your children are receiving a signal that's diminishing and belittling? So it's time for this to end. We're at a point in our history where this should be obvious to everyone. And for those folks who love their teams, you will love your team just as much when it has a non-racist name.
Thank you.
Actually, I have a follow-up question. The Washington Post recently reported the majority of Native Americans support the name of the Washington NFL team. This is a large audience. Can you tell me, are there any supporters of the NFL team here? Boo! Thank you, enough said. I thought I had to ask.
An objective poll right there.
Scientific.
Scientific.
Our last question comes from Carol Davis from the Navajo Nation.
Ja, Shay Carol Davis, First, I'd like to thank you, Mayor, for allowing us this opportunity, and then I'd also like to thank the Native nations whose ancestral homelands that we're gathered here. Thank you. This is a question that there was a similar one yesterday, and I'd like to re-ask it because it was not answered, and it's very important to most of us here. So I'm going to give a little bit of historical context first. Indigenous peoples have the right to self-determination and free, prior, and informed consent, or FPIC, which has now been solidified in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples through the advocacy of Roberta Blackgoat, a Diné Navajo matriarch from Black Mesa, who was a resistor and a survivor of the violent and forced relocation of 10 to 15,000 Navajos from their ancestral homeland to make way for Peabody coal through the 1974 Land Settlement Act. This was the largest human rights violation and mass removal of Indigenous peoples from our homeland in the U.S.'s recent history. Roberta Blackgoat fought hard for FPIC to prevent this from ever happening again to Indigenous peoples. To date, the U.S. State Department continues to define consent only as a process of meaningful consultation with tribal leaders, but not necessarily the agreement of those leaders. This consultation process is inadequate because it is often a last step in development decisions that affect Indigenous peoples instead of including them in all aspects of decision making. Being that FPIC is a core fundamental right of Indigenous peoples intended to prevent future human rights violations and to nurture equitable relationships with federal agencies, how will you work with Indigenous peoples to change federal laws and policies to replace federal consultation practices with a process that respects the right of Indigenous peoples to free, prior, and informed consent?
Thank you very much. As I answer the question, just a thank you to everyone again for this chance to be with you, and just an encouragement and a support and solidarity. I can feel the power in this room, even though I'm only hearing it, in audio. I'm very aware of this moment in history and how important it is that everyone is gathered. And a brother who said earlier that this is about both elders and young people. It's very, very powerful that young people are stepping forward now as leaders, as activists, and we need them and we need to nurture them. So I think this gathering is very, very important because it's going to say to people that there's power. There's power to be built. And all of us as candidates who come before you are respecting that power, and we should all be part of helping you build that power. And I think that goes right into the consent question. Because the truth is the history of this country, in too many cases the federal government was part of all the mistakes and not only denied people their human rights, but destroyed our environment, empowered corporate America, undermined the rights of working people. We've seen it time and time again, and we've seen it intensely in these last few years especially. So I'm not someone who looks at that history and forgives the federal government or is naive about the federal government. And I certainly understand exactly what corporate America has done when it comes to native lands and when it comes to preserving our water, preserving our future. And the corporate sector has, in so many cases, a record that should tell us we should have all sorts of protections. And that, in fact, the empowerment of Native people and tribal governments is part of protecting people and the earth, and human rights. So I believe in consent. Anything that allows us to move away from a history where the rights of Native people are just run over consistently, to me, is the direction we have to go in. We can't allow the model of the past to hold any longer. This is a time where I believe in our time, just these last years especially, more truth is being told, more lies are being uncovered than we've seen in a long, long time. And I think there's a whole new generation in America that's ready to act on the truth that they've now learned, and that's very, very healthy. So I believe in consent because I think that is a beginning of how we respect rights that were so long ignored.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you to Mayor de Blasio and the panel.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
We're going to change just a little bit after the next panel with Senator Sanders, who will begin shortly. So thank you again, Mayor.
All right, Bernie Sanders is next, everybody. Thanks for bearing with us. That was Mayor de Blasio from New York City. We're going to have to mute the mic because this music's going to shut it down. But thanks a lot for joining. We're going to be live right here as Bernie Sanders answers questions from the Native American Presidential Forum. Again, thanks for joining us. Sorry for having to mute right now. We just want to make sure we don't lose the feed. Well, I mean, hey, what's up, everyone? This is Lorenzo with the Unicorn Ride. We're just going to take the feed down for a second and come right back. So if you just hold on, we want to make sure that we don't get interrupted. Oh, never mind. We're going to keep it up. Just keep it up. Don't take it down. Let's not even chance it. Because things go wrong. Anyway, so we're here at the Native American Presidential Forum. There's a podium now. I don't know why. There's never been a podium till now. Bernie Sanders is about to be speaking. He gets a podium, whatever. And there's some drummers. I don't know. It's different. They just decided to do it for Bernie, I guess.
Excuse me.
But we're going to be live. Just stick with us. Here we go.
We're about to hear from the burn. You're going to feel the burn. One thing I would like to ask after Senator Sanders is done is that you stay here. You know, I don't know how people do things in other places, but I know how we as Native people do things here. And what I want you to look at is all these flags. And before anything happened, we posted the colors and the flags because we have from the beginning of time respected our warriors. We respected those women and men that served in the armed forces, whether they're here now or
yes,
past.
clearly.
We're not able to see him. We talks
Is that where?
So,
is that where?
knowing that, after this is over, I wish you would stay until we're able to do our retreat and take our colors down. And then after that, what we're going to do is have a closing of the ceremony song. And at that time, we're going to bring the staff up that has made this work. So if at all possible, if you could stay here after that is done, I think it'd be very good for you to pay the respects for those individuals that made this work. So thank you again. Wopila, I think we made history. So. So let's make sure that this is the only 2 days America knows we're here. You know, let's make sure that we encourage all of our brothers or sisters or relatives. Let's make sure we know that they register to vote. 2020. 2020 and is going to be very important. And wouldn't it be such a righteous thing to happen for Indian country to point the direction of this country moving forward in 2020?
I think it's the person that
So, thank you. I hope you guys stick around and actually thank those that actually made this work. And my wife's looking at me, so I got to sit down.
All right, next up is Bernie Sanders. I think this is the last person who will be answering questions from the Native American Presidential Forum. Again, special attention to the questions being asked. They're coming directly from Indian country. That's why we as Unicorn Riot are here. We thought it would be important to be at this historic event where Indian country was able to ask presidential candidates questions pertaining to their communities. So thanks for joining us. We're going to stay here live, and as always, thanks to all of our donors and patrons for making our coverage possible. I think it should be pretty quick, so we're just gonna keep it up.
Oh. Okay, I let you rest for a little bit before you heard me again. Listen, I just heard the burn is going to be running about 15 minutes late, so if you guys want to use the restroom or go do what you got to do.
That's on time.
I heard he's burning his way over here, so, you know, he should be here. So it's going to be another 15 minutes probably before we start the next one.
Running on Indian time.
Everyone's taking their moment. Yeah, people are pouring in. All right, so it looks like it's going to be 15 minutes until Senator Bernie Sanders will speak. So I'm going to sit here. I don't know if I should take it down, reboot everything just for good measure. Check with the studio. Again, thanks a lot for everybody who's joined us. Okay, so we have, I'm going to go through the list of people we have heard from. What?
Are you talking to me?
I'm totally talking to you. Oh, if you want to talk, you can totally talk. You want to talk? Want to talk about the forum? You want to talk about this forum at all? Oh, live stream. It's like 100 people or so just hanging out. Literally, we're not doing it. You can just sit here. We can just talk about how it's been going. You know, it's up to you though. You know, you can switch. Oh,
Yeah, I'll move wherever anyone tells me to move.
Can you switch with Lord Charles here?
Yeah.
I think people are gonna try to take spots. So if you want to keep a locale here, I would come close.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Okay.
If he's okay. No, you want to get by or?
No.
Okay. Just looking. Okay, everybody, we're gonna have an exclusive interview with independent presidential candidate Mark Charles. Gonna sit right with me, right with you. Sit right here. Let's see how well this goes. You're talking right at the camera. So, if you want to just introduce yourself.
So, yate, Mark Charles, the Inishia, syndicated and to Tohiglini Bashchin, syndicated and
And you're running for president.
I am a dual citizen of the United States and the Navajo Nation, and I am a candidate as an independent for the President of the United States.
And I listened to you speak, so I can ask you questions about that. But you're talking directly about the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. And basically what you said was they're both patriarchal, sort of misogynistic documents. In order to make a better country, you probably should work on the founding documents?
Yes.
You might elaborate on...
At the heart of my campaign is this proposal I have that the United States of America needs a national dialogue on race, gender, and class. A conversation I would put on par with the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions that happened in South Africa, in Rwanda, and in Canada. I would call ours Truth and Conciliation, because reconciliation implies there was a previous harmony. And I think we need one sooner rather than later. It's why it's one of the center planks of my entire campaign. When South Africa had their TRC, they wrote a new constitution. This is the level of change that we need in our nation. It's not about patchworking this broken foundation. We have to get down and deal with the actual cracks in our foundation.
And so what was it's a pretty big statement. I'm sure there's people all over who are just sort of grabbing that, like, this is why this, they're just going crazy with the statement. But what was your journey like to get to this decision where you think we should do this? Like, what did it take to say these documents that everyone holds up are the problem?
Well, when you actually read the documents and you see how they define the terms, and then you see the both legislative and social and military results of those documents, and then you look at the current context that we're living in and the challenges we're facing, it's very clear that because we have these documents that we've never addressed, we have the challenges that we're facing today. And so what I'm trying to do, there's an Aboriginal leader, Dene man from Canada, his name is George Erasmus. And when he was writing a letter about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Canada, he said that where common memory is lacking, where people do not share in the same past, there can be no real community. If you want to build community, he said you have to start by creating a common memory. That quote is genius and gets to the heart of our nation's problem, which is we don't have a common memory. And so part of this Truth and Conciliation Commission is creating this memory. What I tried to do on the stage today is to create this common memory so that we can actually find a way to move forward in better community.
How would you approach people, I don't know, who would be vehemently against this idea? There's people who believe that the history they believe of the United States of conquest, of coming here and sort of bringing civilization, all these ideas sort of handed down through the public education system, like Thanksgiving was this really nice meal. How would you convince those people who believe in that history as the truth and paramount that led to everything? How would you talk to them?
Again, I would ask them to read what our documents actually say. To look at what our history actually was. Once you read the documents and look at the history, there's not much dispute in what I'm saying. I'm not giving some far-fetched theory on what happened. I'm laying out some of the most basic facts. Now, if they want to disagree with those facts, if they want to ignore those facts, I guess that's their prerogative, but I'm quite certain they will be in the minority.
Yeah, and some of these sort of like, we talked about the doctrine of discovery. You talked about it as language that's still being used within our legal system. Like it's language that still exists. It's still deciding. It's still deciding court cases.
Referenced by the Supreme Court as recently as 2005.
And that was like directly the thing that was used to dehumanize Native Americans. It was the papacy, the Catholic Church were like, these aren't humans. You have a right to everything. Yes. Go take it. Yeah. And then that saying is still being used by the United States government.
Well, because the Supreme Court in 1823 referenced that doctrine as the legal precedent for land titles. So that's why when we go back, that's what our foundation is.
They're cutting off this main door.
Mm-hmm.
So
Saturday.
I'm not moving. I don't have to worry about nothing.
To go back, I think they're trying.
Oh yeah, you should probably get back. Thank you so much for talking to us. Do you want to tell people how to look at your campaign or where they can find your information?
You can find my campaign website at markcharles2020.com. I have a 9-minute announcement video laying out what I see as the challenges we're facing, as well as my solution. I'm framing my campaign as a journey. Right now, it's a 14-month journey, or actually a 16-month journey, moving up to the election in 2020, so I can teach this history, help people connect our history to our current reality, and then understand that this is what we need to address if we want to actually make deep systemic change.
And then what was the slogan of your...
The theme of my campaign is I want to build a nation where we the people truly means all the people.
Well, thank you so much for coming.
Good to meet you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, that is candidate Mark Charles. I'm going to be honest, I had pizza at the pizza party last night. So I got to hear a little more from that candidate. So I was there hearing from them. Again, this is going to be Bernie Sanders coming up next. People are flooding in, I guess. Also, everyone's like on top of it. But we're going to sit here. There's a podium now. I don't know why. Everything is different. Here we go. Human beings are human beings. All right.
Hey, would you be able to move down one?
All those seats are taken?
Even the one next to, is that one of yours?
Everyone just went and had cigarettes. Everyone was just, that was all just full.
Monopoly's
Yeah.
Monopoly's sitting.
So,
Huh?
Monopoly.
Oh, Monopoly's sitting there? Okay.
all right, I'm just gonna keep sitting here hoping I get to. Yeah, I mean, eventually it might all get moved.
Which would be fine. Understandable.
We might get moved, which, so everyone knows, I have this seat. It's looking like now I might get moved. And I just want to announce it. I've been sitting here for a long time, but it doesn't matter. I just have a camera. So if that happens, I apologize. Who knows where we end up? Because all the seats are filling up. So if I get moved, I'm going to be put into a terrible position. Because I'm going to have to move into a very full auditorium. So that's what happens, though. Again, that was our interview.
Excuse me here. It would be nice if those of you that aren't elders or tribal leaders move, please.
Anyways,
this was for tribal elders here,
Right.
and reps, chair
Understood.
people.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
It was fine when there wasn't this crowd, but we got a little bit of a crowd now.
You got it.
Sorry.
Thank you, sir.
That's fine.
So guys, all right, so we're gonna move. I don't know where I'm gonna go.
Try to keep you up.
Remember, you would say that all the time. I would ask because they did say because you're pregnant and you asked OJ, they did tell her she could get but that's up to OJ.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's fine.
But I don't know about
That's fine.
Yeah, I'm moving.
Okay.
Get some room because there are some tribal reps and some elders. And you're fine. You said you're fine. No, I wasn't trying to move you. I was just asking people that could.
Okay.
All right.
Go right next to Joy Brown, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, we're moving. I know, there's movement. I'm moving.
Can I get up?
Yeah.
Yeah, bro, you got it. All right, so the seats are being opened up. All right, now I gotta move.
I'm not. What's going on?
We're just told to move. All right.
Too much.
Is someone sitting there? Yep. Where am I gonna go? Yeah.
Huh? You got the boots?
I got the boot. Hey everybody, I'm being moved. I'm trying to figure out how to like find you a better, good position. It doesn't look very positive, to be honest.
Is there anyone sitting in those two
Yeah,
seats?
everyone, all these are
I just don't want to
taken.
block everybody's view.
I think if we're over here, we shouldn't, because everyone's gonna be like this.
He said that sometimes they use it, so if there's an emergency, we gotta just
We
throw
gotta
our
move.
cameras and get the hell out of here.
Just bear with me, everybody. I'll probably get moved a lot, so let's get ready for everything that's about to happen. It's gonna be move town, move central.
I'm like, I think I'm going low-key in labor right now. Are you serious? Yes.
Keep saying it's fine.
Hey, you know what? It's the last one, so who cares?
Yeah.
It's happening. I'm not upset. It's something. I will.
That's what I was doing.
Oh, that's what they're gonna do.
Look at my angle on my camera and then I'm going to my phone.
I hope so.
I think she's one of our translators. And I don't know.
Oh, she's the.
Did you happen to grab that big long stick? Oh, I think she's gonna.
Oh, shit. Go ask her if she can just move back
Hold on, 1 second.
What's going on? Already.
I knew. I felt it. I felt it coming.
I just don't like how I get to sit
Look at me, I got green eyes and like just now.
Put it out. Put it out for a second. We'll have some awesome hand signals going on.
Oh, is he security?
What's the sign for like?
You're security, right?
Yeah. You guys making sure nobody runs on?
Right here?
Am I out of the way?
You know, you're in the way, but there's
You're
nothing
gonna
you
be
can
on a
do.
live feed just for a second.
It was a star in the live feed the whole time.
I can sit too, but when people come up.
Yeah. Yeah, if you sat, that'd be better, but. None of these people wanted to sit. That's what's.
Jennifer.
Excuse me. still alive. I mean, there's a podium now. There's a drum thing. Before, none of the other speakers got. Thrones for after.
Yeah.
Okay. The podium's a little confusing.
Requested it.
Oh, okay.
So.
All right. There, yeah.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Are you gonna stand here the whole time?
Let me sit.
Yeah, he's gonna try to stay out of our shot.
But if someone comes, then
Yeah, you gotta stand up. You gotta make it real, you know? I got you.
I gotta throw an elbow. I gotta throw an elbow.
Dude, we gotta make it cinematic.
Yeah. Well, it's gonna be live. It's all gonna happen in real time. So whatever happens, you got this. You'll also be, if you let somebody by, there's be witnesses.
Yeah.
You got it.
I'm gonna squat. Like,
I
I'm
think
gonna
it's
sit right here.
Sitting in that chair because her pregnant butt sits in there. She's like about to go into labor.
Yeah, go for
And then
it. That's a priority.
He
Just
said-
take
hey,
it.
he said
Just
you
take
can
it.
sit in that
Just
chair.
take it.
hold on. I'm just doing Bernie's like little introduction, and then I'm like going down. It's not a big deal. Like, just okay. Okay, guys, it's okay. Still
All right, it's gonna be perfect. It's gonna be perfect. That's where Bernie's at right now. We just have somebody standing in. It's all right. I got moved, but I'm right here. No one's yelled at me yet. No one's yelling at me yet. That's all that matters.
Right.
Holding it down. Doing good. You're doing good work. Everything gets charged. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Really excited. This is going to be Bernie Sanders answering questions from the Native Forum here. It's the first time ever. Frank Lamere, Native American Presidential Forum, 2019. This is the last presidential candidate. Again, all presidential candidates were invited to attend. We had one independent, no Republicans, and the rest were Democrats. There you go. I'm good at that, right?
Yeah, you are pretty good.
Yesterday I was trying to get through with my tripod.
I can't wait to drink water. Yeah, anyone who's just joining and wondering what's going on, we're just in between different speakers. We just had Mayor de Blasio on. Next we do have Senator Bernie Sanders. And then there's going to be a closing ceremony for the event. We'll probably step back and do an outro then. But thanks a lot again for joining us. Again, this is Unicorn Riot. We are a 501c3 educational nonprofit. We do not commercialize any of this. We just provide this free for educational purposes. So thanks a lot for your support. Thank you to all our donors. Here we go.
Probably the whole time. Yeah, I'm going to try to keep my tripod right on the way. So if anyone's got to walk through, they can walk in. I'm going to try not to be a pain in the ass. Do they know how much longer?
I'm gonna say 10 more minutes.
Is that Indian time? No.
Oh yeah, so I was going to run through all the different candidates who have spoken so far. I'm going to look him up.
What?
Oh, this is the candidates who have spoken? I'm going to stop talking to the live stream.
Oh,
Yeah, everyone's looking at me.
Now you're talking about
I don't talk to them.
imaginary people.
I don't talk. No, I was kidding.
It's fine. I'm like, it's fine. I'm just gonna, I'm live streaming this and then I'm literally just trying to reach this thing my whole year. No. What if they tell you to leave? I'll be like the pretty lady.
Put the tripod over it.
T-Dog, I got your seat back. It's okay, it's fine.
Are you sure?
Yeah, because I have to do all kinds of other stuff. But thank you though, I appreciate it.
You might have to run off to have a
I
baby.
may have a baby right now.
That's how real it is here. Just so everyone knows, someone may go into labor soon.
May go into labor.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah, but they're busy filming. They're gonna work, do their work first, and then go have the baby if needed.
Right.
First, we're gonna call Ryan.
We're gonna follow along. If someone goes to labor, we'll follow along, bring it to you live.
Live birth, literally.
I was kidding. We're not gonna do that. So anyone knows. We're gonna say. I know. I'm just talking to different videographers here. We're just waiting till the next speaker. We heard from Mariana Williamson, Elizabeth Warren. I'm just thinking, Kamala Harris was here, John Delaney. I'm talking to the stream. And Bernie Sanders is going up next. That's just a few of them. Independent Mark Charles was here. Joe Sita started today. I'm just trying to go through this list. All right, I think that the panelists list have lined up. They're getting ready to come out, so.
That's my chairman over there. He'll be on the panelists. His name is Doug. He's in the gray shirt.
You're in the gray shirt.
You're in the gray shirt.
We're all in the gray shirt.
Yep. Don't fall off this thing. It's like that freaking ladder.
We're all worried about us, and then that one. I have a huge headache.
Tylenol. Drink water.
I do.
Don't like water. We also had Senator Amy Klobuchar yesterday and Governor Steve Bullock close out the day, so you know. And today has been pretty busy. Julian Castro, Senator Bernie Sanders, Mayor de Blasio, Mark Charles, Joe Sistek, sorry. Sistek, I didn't know. That person spoke today, they opened it out. John Delaney was also here. And Kamala Harris. That's it. That's all of them. All right. So we're getting ready for Senator Bernie Sanders.
I was totally like. Well, because I think I'm either gonna go there and do like, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. That was just for my own, like, you know, at this point, I'm like, I might do something like that.
Oh.
Yeah. It's just to get whatever. I'm like,
oh, here they come. So Senator Bernie Sanders is coming up.
My name is Allison Renville. I am a assisted and walk Eastern South Dakota. I'm also Hunkpapa Lakota and Eagle Clan from the Omaha Nation. At a time when we have really put action behind a lot of the curs that we've established over the